Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto became the 5th emperor of the sea and fell in love with Yuta. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Maelstrom King. The sea did not churn in the unnavigable sea, it raged. It was a place where compasses spun like drunken dancers and the sky was a permanent bruise of purple and gray. Storms were not events here, they were the very state of being. Waves, tall as mountains and sharp as glass, rose and fell in a symphony of chaotic destruction. For generations, this region of the New World was a tomb, a blank spot on the maps of even the most daring navigators, marked only with a skull and the words, "Here be monsters." But monsters, like men, could be tamed. The 50 ships of the Iron Tusk Armada sliced through the outer edges of the storm wall, their hulls groaning under the strain. Timbers creaked a chorus of protest against the crushing pressure of the water. On the foredeck of the flagship, the Tuscan raider, Captain Ironjaw, Grogan grinned, the metal prosthesis that replaced his lower jaw glinting even in the dim, violent light. He was a mountain of a man, draped in the furs of sea kings he'd personally slain, his confidence as vast and loud as the ocean itself. "See," he boomed, his voice a gravelly echo amplified by his metallic jaw. "The legends are just stories. Old wives' tales to scare children and cowards." His first mate, a wiry man named Silas with a perpetually nervous twitch in his eye, gripped the railing until his knuckles were white. "Captain, the currents, they're not natural. They feel guided. Every lookout reports the same thing. The storm feels like a wall, not a weather pattern." Grogan spat a glob of something dark onto the deck. "Everything in the New World is unnatural, Silas. That's what makes it worth conquering. They say a new emperor has claimed this territory. An emperor with no fleet, no commanders, no history. They call him the Maelstrom King. A ghost story." He laughed, a harsh, scraping sound. "I have 50 ships, 10,000 men, and a hunger that could swallow the Red Line whole. When I'm done, they'll call me emperor. I'll hang this Maelstrom King's head from my mast and his territory will be the first jewel in my crown." A younger crewman, no older than 16, shimmied down from the crow's nest, his face pale with a mixture of seasickness and terror. "Captain. It's just as the rumors said. The edge of the storm, it's a perfect circle. And inside is what, boy? Speak up before I toss you to the Sea Kings for a snack." The boy swallowed hard, pointing a trembling finger forward. "Inside, it's calm." Grogan shoved him aside and stomped to the bow. As the Tuscan raider breached the final, towering wave of the storm wall, the world transformed. The cacophony of roaring wind and crashing water ceased instantly, replaced by a profound, unnerving silence. Before them lay a sea of impossible tranquility. The water was as smooth and clear as polished turquoise, reflecting a sky of serene, cloudless blue. In the center of this massive, circular calm, a cluster of lush, green islands rested, bathed in warm sunlight. The air was sweet with the scent of salt and flowers. It was paradise, ring-fenced by hell. The entire armada of 50 ships sailed out of the thundering tempest and into the placid eye. The sudden peace was more unsettling than the storm had ever been. Men lowered their rain-slicked hoods, their eyes wide with disbelief. The silence was so absolute they could hear the gentle lapping of water against their own hulls from ships hundreds of meters away. Silas's twitch grew more frantic. "Captain, this is wrong. All wrong. It's a trap." "It's a prize," Grogan corrected, his eyes gleaming with avarice. He scanned the main island. A small, pristine town with white-walled buildings and terracotta roofs nestled in a gentle valley. No fortifications. No cannons. No signs of an army. He's a hermit, not an emperor. A man with a strange devil fruit who thinks he can hide from the world. We'll relieve him of his fruit and his islands. He raised a massive, scarred fist. All ships. Cannons at the ready. Aim for the largest building in that pathetic little town. On my mark, we turn this paradise into a parking lot for my new castle. Thousands of cannon ports opened in unison, a ripple of black squares across the fleet. The gunners aimed, waiting for the command to unleash hell. The air grew thick with anticipation, the only sound the creaking of wood and the distant cry of a seabird. Ready! Grogan roared. Aim! A voice, calm and clear, cut through the silence. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, carrying over the water with no visible source. Turn back. Grogan's head snapped around. His crewmen muttered, searching the decks, the sea, the sky. Who said that? Show yourself, coward. The voice spoke again, laced with a hint of weary patience, as if speaking to a child about to touch a hot stove. This is your only warning. The people on that island are under my protection. Your quarrel is with me, not them. Leave now, and you will be allowed to leave. A ripple of unease spread through the fleet. The unnatural calm, the disembodied voice, it was beginning to feel less like a conquest and more like trespassing in a graveyard. But Grogan's arrogance was a fortress. Protection. I am Ironjaw Grogan. I have crushed islands for looking at me funny. No one is protected from me. He drew a colossal, jagged cleaver from his back. Fire. The command was given. Tensed muscles moved. But no order was followed. A figure had appeared. He wasn't there a second ago, and now he was. He stood on the surface of the water, halfway between the fleet and the island, as if it were solid ground. He wore simple black pants and a high-collared, burnt-orange jacket. His hair was a bright, defiant shock of sun-blonde, and his eyes, when he finally looked up, were a startling, piercing blue. A black headband with a stylized metal leaf was tied around his forehead. He wasn't large or overtly muscular, but he held himself with an unshakable stillness that dwarfed every ship in the armada. This was Naruto Uzumaki. I said, Naruto repeated, his voice no louder than before, yet it carried an authority that froze the blood. Turn back. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Grogan's rage shattered the spell. One man. You dare face my armada alone? Kill him. Blow him to pieces. A cannon on the nearest ship fired. The massive iron ball screamed through the air, aimed directly at Naruto's chest. It was a perfect shot, impossible to dodge at that range. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised a hand. The cannonball stopped dead a foot from his palm, hovering in the air as if it had struck an invisible wall. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent it flying back. It didn't just fly, it accelerated, a black blur that punched a perfectly clean hole straight through the main mast of the ship that fired it. The mast splintered, cracked, and came crashing down onto the deck with a scream of tortured wood and tangled rigging. Panic erupted on that ship. Grogan's eyes widened, his metal jaw hanging slightly agape. What? What devil fruit is that? Naruto's eyes closed for a second. A faint, orange pigmentation appeared around them, the mark of a power this world had never seen. When they opened again, his pupils had become horizontal bars, like those of a toad. He was no longer just seeing them. He was feeling them. In that instant, Sage Mode connected him to everything. He felt the frantic heartbeat of the rookie in the crow's nest, the greedy thrum in Grogan's chest, the tremor of fear in Silas's hand. He sensed the precise location of every commander, every weapons cache, every weak point in every single ship. He heard the whispered orders, the muttered prayers, the clank of a sword being drawn from its sheath 5 ships away. He felt the collective will of 10,000 men, and he found it wanting. You had your chance, he said, his voice now layered with the deep, resonant hum of nature itself. He brought his hands together in a simple cross seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The air around him exploded in puffs of white smoke. Not 10, not 100, but 1,000 identical copies of Naruto Uzumaki materialized on the surface of the water, a sea of orange and black that mirrored the fleet arrayed against them. The pirates stared, dumbfounded. Clones, someone shrieked. What kind of trick is this? Grogan recovered his bluster. They're illusions. Phantoms. All ships, full barrage. Wipe them all out. This time, the cannons fired. A deafening roar shattered the peace as hundreds of cannonballs rained down on the army of clones. The water erupted in colossal geysers. But it was pointless. The clones were already moving. They ran across the water, blurs of orange that were impossible to track. Some leaped, clearing hundreds of feet to land silently on the decks of the outermost ships. Others simply vanished from one spot and reappeared in another. The invasion of the Iron Tusk Armada became a systematic, terrifyingly efficient dismantling. On one ship, a Naruto clone appeared before a line of riflemen. They fired. He moved like a flicker of light, weaving between the bullets, and disarmed them all in a fluid motion, their rifles clattering to the deck before they even realized their hands were empty. Another clone landed on a different ship, traced a series of hand signs, and slammed its palm onto the deck. The rudder is sealed, it said calmly, before vanishing in a puff of smoke. The ship began to turn in helpless circles. All across the fleet, the same scene played out with chilling precision. Clones swarmed the decks, not killing, but disabling. They tied up crewmen with their own rope, dismantled cannon mechanisms, and sliced through rigging with kunai that appeared in their hands. They moved with a purpose that was both intelligent and hive-minded. Every pirate who fought back was subdued instantly with a swift, precise chop to the back of the neck that rendered them unconscious. There was no malice, no cruelty. It was like an act of nature, as impersonal and unstoppable as a flood. Silas watched in horror from the flagship's bridge. He saw a dozen clones board a neighboring frigate. They moved in perfect sync, one group engaging the crew while another went below deck. Moments later, the ship's ammunition store erupted in a controlled, upward blast, sending cannonballs and gunpowder harmlessly into the sky like fireworks. The clone that had orchestrated it stood on the railing for a moment, gave a jaunty wave, and dispersed. "Captain, we have to retreat." Silas screamed, shaking Grogan's massive arm. "This isn't a man, it's a demon. We've lost control of half the fleet in less than 5 minutes." Grogan, for the first time, felt a sliver of true fear. His men weren't being killed, they were being neutralized, rendered utterly impotent. It was more humiliating, more absolute a defeat than any massacre. His reputation was being unwritten before his very eyes. "No," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "I am Ironjaw Grogan. I will not be defeated by parlor tricks." He pointed at the original Naruto, who still stood calmly on the water, observing the chaos his copies wrought. "He's the source. All remaining cannons, concentrate fire on the original. Now." The few ships still under his command turned their guns. Perhaps a dozen cannons fired, all aimed at the one true Naruto. Naruto watched the cannonballs arc toward him. He didn't seem concerned. He simply raised his right hand. A whirlwind of pure, blue energy began to swirl in his palm, growing with a high-pitched, grinding shriek. It stabilized into a perfect sphere of raw, spinning power. Rasengan. He didn't throw it. He met the volley head-on. As the first cannonball reached him, he thrust the sphere forward. The Rasengan connected with the iron, and for a split second, nothing happened. Then, the cannonball didn't explode, it was ground into dust. The spiraling energy tore through it and continued, unabated, striking the next cannonball, and the next, disintegrating them all in a shower of metallic powder. The Rasengan, now visibly larger and more violent, didn't stop. Naruto propelled himself forward, a golden-yellow aura flaring around him, and slammed the attack into the hull of the Tusken Raider. There was no grand explosion. There was only a sound like the world being torn apart. The Rasengan drilled into the thick, reinforced wood, churning it into splinters. It ripped through the deck, then the deck below, and the one below that, carving a huge, gaping hole through the heart of the flagship. The colossal vessel, the pride of Grogan's armada, shuddered violently, let out a final, groaning death cry, and began to break in two. Grogan stood on the tilting deck, his cleaver having fallen from his numb fingers. He stared at the calm, blue-eyed man who now hovered where the center of his ship used to be. The man who had just single-handedly defeated an armada of 50 ships without, as far as he could tell, killing a single soul. What are you?" Grogan whispered, his voice stripped of all its bravado. Naruto's gaze was not one of anger, but of disappointment. "I'm the man who gave you a choice." He made another hand sign. A new wave of clones appeared on the sinking halves of the Tusken Raider. They moved efficiently, grabbing the dazed and terrified crewmen, including Grogan, and tossing them onto emergency life rafts that other clones had already inflated. Within minutes, the remains of the flagship were empty, sinking into the placid, turquoise water. All around them, the battle was over. 49 ships were disabled, demasted, rudderless, their crews bound and disarmed. The 50th was now a new, man-made reef. Thousands of pirates drifted on a sea of bright yellow life rafts, staring in stunned silence at the lone figure who had brought them so low. The 1,000 clones dissipated, leaving only the original. Naruto hovered in the air for a moment longer, his gaze sweeping over the wreckage. He had protected his home. He had shown mercy. But the demonstration had to be absolute. With a slow, deliberate gesture, he raised his hands. The storm wall that encircled the calm sea began to churn with renewed vigor. The winds howled, and the waves grew monstrous once more. A powerful, outward current formed, grabbing hold of the disabled ships and the life rafts, and began to push them away, back out into the turbulent waters of the New World. They were being ejected. Banished. As his life raft was swept back into the raging storm, Ironjaw Grogan looked back one last time at the impossible island of calm. The blond man was gone. The paradise was hidden once more. He had set out to hunt a ghost story and had been defeated by a god. Miles away, cloaked by a sophisticated optical camouflage field, a single, sleek black vessel of the world government observed the entire event. On its deck stood Vice Admiral Stanza, a tall, severe woman with sharp eyes and a sterner jawline, flanked by two masked agents of Cipher Pol Aegis Zero. One agent held a state-of-the-art visual Den Mushi, its lens zoomed in, recording everything. The silence on their ship was as profound as the one in Naruto's sea. Stanza's knuckles were white where she gripped the hilt of her sheathed sword. "Report," she said, her voice tight. The CP-0 agent lowered the Den Mushi. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but the tension behind it was palpable. 52 ships in the Armada, Vice Admiral. Correcting, 51 ships and one large sloop. Captain Ironjaw Grogan, bounty 780 million berry. Total crew estimated at 10,000. The target appeared at 14:02. Engagement lasted 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Casualties? Stanza asked. 0, the agent replied. The word hung in the air, heavier than any body count. All crewmen were neutralized and set adrift. All ships, save the flagship, were disabled but left afloat. The target displayed abilities inconsistent with any known devil fruit or hockey application. The second agent spoke, his head tilted. The multiplication ability, it surpasses the parameters of the Wara Wara no Mi. Each copy acted with independent, strategic intelligence. The energy projection he used to destroy the flagship, it left no heat signature. It wasn't fire or magma. It was, concussive. Rotational. And his sensory abilities, he reacted to threats he could not possibly have seen or heard. Vice Admiral Stanza stared at the swirling vortex where the calm sea had been. She had fought in the New World for 20 years. She had seen the power of Whitebeard, traded blows with Kaido's commanders, and witnessed the terrifying might of the admirals. This was different. This wasn't the raw, chaotic power of a pirate king. This was controlled, precise, and absolute. It was the power of a master warrior, a seasoned general, and a force of nature all rolled into one. It is as the Gorosei feared, the first agent said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The readings are off the charts. We are detecting a fundamental energy source we have no classification for. It is not Haki. He is not a devil fruit user. He is something else. An anomaly. A foreign variable. Stanza finally looked away from the storm. Send the full, unedited recording to Fleet Admiral Sakazuki. Send a separate, encrypted copy directly to Mary Geos, Priority Level Omega. Title the report, The Maelstrom King. Note that the rumors are not exaggerated, they are understated. The New World has a fifth emperor. She paused, her hand tightening on her sword. And the world government has a new, existential threat. The news spread like wildfire. The drifting, defeated pirates were found by other crews and marine patrols. Their story was so unbelievable it had to be true. Morgans, the flamboyant king of the world news, had a field day. A special edition of the paper was printed, the headline screaming across the front page in bold, world-shaking letters, The Fifth Emperor. Iron Jaw Grogan's armada annihilated by one man. The Maelstrom King claims the unnavigable sea. Beneath it was a grainy, telephoto sketch, likely drawn from a survivor's frantic description, a man with spiky blonde hair, a strange headband, and eyes that held the calm of the storm's eye. The world, from the weakest sailor in the East Blue to the 5 elders in the Holy Land, now knew his name. Back in the eye of the storm, Naruto floated down to the pristine white sands of his island's main beach. The name he'd given this place was a memory, a hope, Yuzushio. New Whirlpool. He let out a long sigh, the orange pigmentation around his eyes fading. The immense power of Sage Mode receded, leaving him feeling the world in normal, mortal terms once more. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox sealed within him, grumbled in the quiet of his mind. You were too soft on them. You should have sunk the lot. It would have sent a clearer message. A sea full of corpses sends a message of fear, Naruto thought back, his mental voice calm. A sea full of survivors telling the tale of their utter defeat, and my mercy sends a message of strength. Fear breeds desperation. Strength breeds respect. We need the latter. Humph. You and your philosophies. You're lucky this world is mostly water. Gives you a tactical advantage. Naruto chuckled, a genuine, warm sound. He stretched his arms over his head, feeling the satisfying pop in his shoulders. He had been in this world for 5 years now. Thrown here after his final, cataclysmic battle with a foe who could tear holes in reality itself, he had arrived wounded, alone, and adrift in a world he didn't understand. But he had done what he always did, he endured. He learned. He found people who were lost, broken, and forgotten, escaped slaves, refugees from war-torn islands, families fleeing pirates, and he gave them a home. He carved out this piece of the world with his own power, not for conquest, but for peace. A sanctuary. And he would defend it with every fiber of his being. His senses, even without Sage Mode, were sharp. He felt a shift in the currents at the edge of his territory. It wasn't the aggressive push of an invading fleet, nor the random drift of wreckage. It was something else. Something small, hesitant. He focused, extending his chakra just enough to feel. A single ship. It was unlike any he had sensed before. Its energy was whimsical. Playful. It wasn't a warship. It was drifting into his calm waters, not with purpose, but as if drawn by a magnet. Curious, he walked along the beach, the setting sun casting a long shadow behind him. He rounded a rocky outcrop and saw it. The ship was a marvel of strange design. It looked like a floating concert hall, adorned with musical notes, keyboards, and stylized wings. It was painted in vibrant shades of pink and purple. It was the most unpirate-like ship he had ever seen. Standing on its deck, looking around in wide-eyed wonder, was a young woman. Her hair was a striking mix of two tones, half white and half crimson, tied into elaborate, wing-like braids. She wore a futuristic, stylized jacket over a simple dress, and headphones rested around her neck. She looked less like a sailor and more like she had just stepped off a stage. This was Yuta, the world's most beloved singer, the diva. She hadn't noticed him yet. Her gaze was fixed on the sky, the sea, the island. Her head was tilted, as if listening to something no one else could hear. "It's gone," she whispered to herself, her voice a melodic hush. The noise, the screaming of the sea, the anger, it all just stopped. And then, this quiet. It's like a perfect harmony. She felt a presence and her head snapped toward the beach. Her eyes, a deep, expressive violet, locked with his. She saw a man standing there, bathed in the orange glow of the sunset. He looked powerful, yet peaceful. The dissonance was fascinating. He was the eye of his own storm. Naruto looked at the strange girl on the even stranger ship. He had just faced down an armada, his name was likely echoing in the halls of power across the globe, and his mind was already turning to the inevitable repercussions. But seeing her, this unexpected, colorful visitor, all of that faded away for a moment. He felt a simple, uncomplicated curiosity. He offered a small, welcoming smile. It was the same smile he'd given to so many lost souls before her. Yuta felt a strange flutter in her chest. She had traveled the world, sung for millions, stood before kings and warlords. But the calm, genuine smile from this lone man on a secret island felt more significant than any of it. He wasn't looking at her like a fan, or a target, or a prize. He was just looking at her. She found her voice, calling across the water. "Hello. Who are you?" Naruto's smile widened slightly. He gave a small shrug, the gesture impossibly casual given the circumstances. "I'm the guy who lives here," he called back, his voice warm and inviting. "Welcome to Uzushio." She stared at him, the rumored Maelstrom King, the new emperor of the sea, who had just single-handedly brought an army to its knees. And he was welcoming her as if she were a neighbor stopping by for tea. A slow smile spread across Yuta's face. This was, without a doubt, the most interesting thing that had ever happened to her. Her song had led her here, to the silence after the storm. And in that silence, a new melody was about to begin. Chapter 2, The Song of the New Era. Yuta stepped off her whimsical ship onto the solid ground of Uzushio, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, white sand. The man who called himself Naruto, the Maelstrom King, the fifth emperor, the subject of a world-shaking headline she had read just that morning, watched her with an easygoing posture that seemed utterly at odds with his reputation. The setting sun framed him in gold, turning his blonde hair into a fiery halo and making his blue eyes seem like fragments of the impossibly calm sea at his back. "Uzushio," she repeated, tasting the name. It felt familiar, like a half-remembered melody. "As in, the whirlpool." "That's brave. Considering." She gestured vaguely at the colossal storm wall that separated this placid haven from the chaotic reality of the new world. Naruto's smile didn't falter. "Sometimes you have to build your home in the one place no one else is crazy enough to look for it. Besides," he added, a hint of mischief in his tone, "I like whirlpools." He led her up the beach toward the town she had seen from her ship. It was even more idyllic up close. The path was made of smooth, white stones, flanked by vibrant flower beds bursting with colors she'd never seen before. The buildings were a simple but elegant blend of whitewashed walls and warm, terracotta-tiled roofs, designed with a gentle curvature that made them feel part of the landscape rather than an imposition upon it. There were no walls, no guard towers, no visible defenses of any kind. The only thing protecting this town was the man walking beside her and the terrifying, godlike power he had just unleashed. As they entered the main square, people began to emerge from their homes and workshops. Yuta had braced herself for the usual reactions her presence brought, the gasps of recognition, the starstruck awe, the clamor for a song. But that's not what happened. The people, a diverse mix of humans, fishmen, minks, and some with the telltale long limbs or extra joints of other tribes, smiled first at Naruto. They greeted him not as a king, but as a friend, a neighbor. Lord Naruto. The western fields are irrigated, a burly fishman with the gills of a carp called out, wiping his hands on a rag. He gave a respectful nod, but his eyes were full of warmth, not fear. Good work, Kaido. Naruto called back with a thumbs up. Did the new pump design hold up? Like a dream. No more hauling buckets. A small girl with fluffy mink ears and a twitching rabbit-like nose darted out from behind her mother's legs, holding up a clumsily woven flower crown. She ran right up to Naruto, her initial shyness overcome by excitement. Naruto stopped, crouching down to her level, his entire demeanor softening. For me, Yumi? He asked, his voice gentle. The girl nodded vigorously, placing the lopsided crown on his head. The bright yellow flowers clashed wonderfully with his spiky hair. He grinned, a wide, honest grin that reached his eyes. It's perfect. Thank you. He ruffled her hair, and she giggled, darting back to her mother, her day clearly made. Yuta watched this exchange, her mind reeling. She had sung for orphans and the downtrodden, her heart aching with a desperate need to fix their sadness. She had envisioned a new era where she could use her voice to wash away all pain. But this wasn't an absence of pain. This was the presence of genuine joy, built right alongside the memory of suffering. The fish-man, Kaido, she saw the faint brand of a celestial dragon's hoof seared into his neck, partially hidden by his collar. The mink girl's mother had a haunted look in her eyes that spoke of a home lost to fire and war. These weren't people who had forgotten their pasts, they were people who had been given a future. They looked at her next, and there was recognition, yes, but it was secondary. They saw her as Naruto's guest, and that afforded her a courtesy that was calmer and more profound than any fanfare she had ever received. Is that, the diva? Someone whispered. She's so pretty in person. Lord Naruto brought her here. She must be important. Naruto, seemingly oblivious to the flower crown still askew on his head, motioned for her to follow him. Come on. There's a spot I want to show you. Best view on the whole island. They walked through the town, and Yuta felt like she was in a dream. It was a functioning society, vibrant and alive. She saw a former Marine, identifiable by his bearing and the faded tattoo on his arm, teaching a group of children how to read in an open-air classroom. She saw a woman who looked suspiciously like a former bounty hunter tending to a vegetable garden, arguing happily with a long-armed man over the proper way to stake tomatoes. It was a mosaic of the world's forgotten pieces, assembled into something whole and beautiful. How? She asked, her voice quiet as they left the town and started up a winding path on a nearby cliff. How did you do all this? The world government, the other emperors, they thrive on chaos, on division. This place, it shouldn't exist. Naruto was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the path ahead. Everyone deserves a place to call home, he said simply. A place where they're not judged by where they came from, but by who they are. I didn't do anything special. I just gave them that space and got rid of anyone who tried to take it away. The simplicity of his answer was staggering. He spoke of defying the fundamental powers of the world as if he were talking about weeding a garden. They reached the summit of the cliff just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange, pink, and deep violet. The view was breathtaking. Below them, the entirety of Uzushio was laid out, lights beginning to twinkle in the homes as evening set in. Beyond the town, the tranquil, circular sea glowed under the painted sky, and further still, the monstrous, swirling wall of the maelstrom stood as a silent, formidable guardian. "Wow," Yuta breathed, walking to the edge. The wind whipped her hair, the twin-tone strands dancing around her face. "You really do live in the eye of the storm." "It's the quietest place I could find," Naruto said, coming to stand beside her. He had finally taken off the flower crown, holding it gently in his hand. "This world, it's so loud. So full of anger and pain. I can feel it sometimes, pressing in at the edges." His words struck a chord deep within her. It was the exact feeling that drove her, that fueled her music. The overwhelming noise of the world's suffering. "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I hear it too. In every country I visit, in the faces of every crowd. They smile, they cheer, but underneath it all, there's so much hurt. So much loneliness. That's why I sing. I want to create a new Genesis, a perfect world with my music where all of that just goes away. Forever." She spoke with a burning passion, the creed that had become her entire identity. It was her dream, her purpose. She expected him to agree, to praise her noble goal. Instead, Naruto looked at her with a gentle, questioning gaze. "A perfect world?" he asked. "With no pain? No sadness? Do you think that's really what people want?" Yuta was taken aback. "Of course it is. Who would choose to suffer?" "No one chooses to suffer," he conceded, his eyes turning back to the horizon. "But our pain, our struggles, they're part of what makes us who we are. They forge our bonds. They teach us what's worth fighting for. If you take all of that away, what's left? Are we even the same people anymore?" He looked down at the flower crown in his hand. "That little girl, Yumi, her family fled from an island destroyed by pirates. They lost everything. She was terrified of everyone and everything when they first got here. She wouldn't even speak. But now," he smiled faintly. "Now she's brave enough to run up to a stranger and give him flowers. Her past is part of that strength. If you erase her pain, you also erase her victory over it." Yuta stared at him, a turmoil of emotions swirling inside her. No one had ever challenged her dream before. They either called it impossible or praised it as angelic. No one had ever suggested that it might be wrong. "But the suffering is too much," she insisted, her voice rising. "Children starve, people are enslaved, wars tear families apart for nothing. My father, he tried to bring about an era of peace through piracy, and all it did was create more chaos. There has to be a better way. My way lets everyone be happy, together." "My dream wasn't so different from yours," Naruto said softly. His words were so unexpected they cut through her passionate defense. "I just wanted to be acknowledged. I was alone my whole life. The whole village I grew up in, they hated me. They looked at me like I was a monster, a demon they were forced to tolerate." Yuta's breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, this man who radiated such warmth and confidence, this emperor who commanded the sea itself, and tried to picture him as a lonely child. It didn't compute. "You. But you're so strong. Everyone here loves you. How could you ever have been alone?" It was the question he'd been waiting for, the one that showed she was truly listening. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that he could trust her. Kurama grumbled a word of caution in his mind, but Naruto quieted him. This was necessary. For her to understand him, she couldn't just hear his words. She had to feel them. "It's hard to explain," he said, turning to face her fully. The last light of dusk cast his features in shadow, making his blue eyes seem to glow. "But I can show you. If you'll let me." She was hesitant. "Show me? How?" He held out his hand. "Just trust me. I won't hurt you." His voice was steady, a rock in the churning sea of her confusion. She looked at his outstretched hand. Then back to his eyes. She saw no deception there, only a profound sincerity. Something inside her, the same instinct that had drawn her ship into his calm waters, told her this was right. She placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and slightly calloused. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of pure, golden energy, warm as the sun, flowed up her arm. It wasn't frightening. It felt alive. He placed his other hand gently on her forehead. "Just relax," he whispered. "And try to understand." The world dissolved. It wasn't a vision or a dream. It was a flood. She was suddenly 6 years old, sitting on a lonely swing as other children ran past, their parents pulling them away, whispering words like "demon fox" and "stay away." She felt the cold, gnawing ache of absolute solitude, a loneliness so profound it felt like a physical hunger. She felt the sting of hateful glares on her skin, the crushing weight of being utterly, completely unwanted. Then, the sensation shifted. She felt the warmth of a hand on her head, the taste of ramen shared with a teacher who was the first person to ever see her, not the monster. The warmth of Irika-sensei's acceptance was a sunbeam in an endless winter. The feelings came in a rush, a lifetime of emotion compressed into moments. The fierce, burning rivalry with a dark-haired boy, a bond of brotherhood forged in conflict. The gut-wrenching sorrow and rage of betrayal as that brother left, chasing a darkness she could taste. The goofy, sage advice of a pervy old man who became a grandfather, and the soul-shattering emptiness his death left behind, a hole in her very being. She felt the raw, terrifying power of the nine-tailed fox, Kurama, a torrent of hatred and fury sealed inside her, a constant battle of wills. Then, amazingly, she felt that hatred slowly, grudgingly, transform into a bond, a partnership, an unbreakable friendship. She felt the weight of a village's hope on her shoulders, the joy of returning as a hero to the same people who had once scorned her. She felt the pride, the responsibility, and the quiet satisfaction of becoming Hokage, the leader who protected everyone. Finally, she felt the dislocating tear of reality itself, a final, desperate battle against a being of immense power, the feeling of being ripped from her world and thrown, broken and alone, into a new one. The loneliness returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't the hollow ache of a child, it was the weary solitude of a veteran, a king without a kingdom. The flood receded. Yuta found herself standing on the cliff, her hand still in Naruto's, his other hand no longer on her forehead. Tears were streaming down her face, but she hadn't even realized she was crying. The sun was completely gone now, and the stars were beginning to emerge in the dark velvet of the sky. She looked at him, and she saw everything. The lonely boy on the swing. The determined ninja. The grieving student. The struggling hero. The wise leader. The powerful emperor. They were all him, layers of pain and joy and struggle that had forged the man standing before her. "You," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You really were all alone." Naruto gave her a small, sad smile. "For a while. But I found people who believed in me. I made bonds. Those bonds gave me strength. That's what I'm trying to build here. Not a world without pain. A world where no one has to face their pain alone." Yuta finally understood. His vision wasn't about erasing the bad parts of life. It was about creating a support system so strong that people could endure them. It wasn't a perfect world, it was a resilient one. And in its own way, it was a far more beautiful, and far more achievable, dream than her own. Her concept of a new Genesis felt childish in comparison. An easy answer to a complex problem. She pulled her hand away and wiped at her tears, a new resolve hardening in her violet eyes. "My song. I always thought its purpose was to make people forget. But what if its real purpose is to help them remember? To help them feel the kinds of bonds you're talking about?" Before Naruto could answer, his head snapped up, his entire posture changing in an instant. The gentle warmth vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. The orange pigmentation flared around his eyes again. What is it? Yuta asked, alarmed by the sudden shift. Trouble, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. He was looking out, past the maelstrom, into the chaotic waters of the new world. A group of ships just entered the outer currents. They're trying to use the storm to mask their approach. He closed his eyes, his senses extending for miles. They're not marines. Their energy, it's foul. Full of bloodlust and desperation. Remnants. Remnants of what? Kaido, Naruto answered, his eyes snapping open. Beast pirates. Looking for a new master to serve or a new territory to pillage. And they just found one. On the deck of the lead ship, a battered but still formidable vessel named the Dread Horn, Scythehorn, Zaka laughed, a grating sound like boulders grinding together. He was a giant of a man, even for the new world, with skin like granite and a pair of wickedly curved horns jutting from his forehead. He was an officer of the old regime, a headliner who had commanded 1,000 men, his loyalty to Kaido absolute. With his master gone, that loyalty had curdled into a bitter, directionless rage. The reports are true, he snarled to his crew, a ragged collection of survivors from the raid on Onigashima. A pocket of calm sea. That new emperor must have some trick, some devil fruit. We'll take his fruit, take his island, and build a new foundation for the glory of the beast pirates. Kaido-sama may be gone, but his strength will live on through us. His men roared in approval, their spirits lifted by the promise of plunder. They were wolves without a pack, and they were starving. Sir, a subordinate said, pointing. The island, it's undefended. No cannons, no fleet. Zaka grinned, a terrifying sight. Then it's a gift. All ships, full speed ahead. Slaughter anyone who stands in your way. This land is ours. As their ships breached the storm wall and entered the calm sea, they were met not by an army, but by a line of figures standing on the shore. There were maybe 24 of them. A tall, graceful mink with the features of a jaguar. A stern fishman with the saw-like nose of his namesake shark. A human woman with her hair tied back, 2 sharp-looking daggers strapped to her waist. They were Naruto's core guards, the first people he had rescued, his shinobi pirates as they half-jokingly called themselves. Zaka scoffed. Is that it? A welcoming committee? How pathetic. Don't even bother with the cannons. Land the troops. I'll handle their leader myself. Hundreds of beast pirates swarmed from the ships, roaring their battle cries as they splashed through the shallows and charged up the beach. Naruto and Yuta had arrived back in the town moments before. People were scared, but there was no panic. They trusted him. Kaido, get all civilians to the shelters under the main hall, Naruto ordered, his voice ringing with command. Ishi, he said to the jaguar mink, you and the others will hold the beach. Your job isn't to win, it's to delay. Keep them from reaching the town. I'll deal with their leader. And what about me? Yuta asked, stepping forward. Her heart was pounding, but after what Naruto had shown her, she felt a strange new clarity. Her place wasn't hiding in a shelter. Naruto looked at her, then at her ship, the Neogenesis stage, which had been carefully moored in the main harbor. An idea sparked in his mind. Your voice, he said. You said you wanted it to help people form bonds. Let's see if it can forge them in the middle of a battle. Understanding dawned on her face. She nodded once, a look of fierce determination replacing any trace of fear, and sprinted toward her ship. On the beach, the clash began. Ishi the mink moved like a blur, his claws flashing, electrocharged, sending pirates flying. The saw-nosed fishman, Gontu, used his fishman karate to send shockwaves through the water, knocking invaders off their feet. They and the rest of the shinobi pirates were skilled warriors, fighting with a disciplined ferocity born of Naruto's training. But they were vastly outnumbered, and the beast pirates were hardened veterans of the new world. Scythehorn Zaka stomped onto the beach, ignoring the skirmishes. He was looking for the man in charge. His eyes found Naruto, who was walking calmly toward him. "So you're the Maelstrom King," Zaka sneered, sizing him up. "You're smaller than the stories say. I am Zaka, formerly of the Beast Pirates. This island is now mine. Surrender and swear fealty to me, and I might let you live as my bootlick." Naruto didn't even slow his pace. "You have the same choice I give everyone who comes here with weapons drawn," he said, his voice even. "Lay down your arms and live here in peace. Or be broken and cast out. Choose." Zaka laughed. "You think you can break me? I ate the Ryu no Mi, ancient model, Carnotaurus. I am a force of nature." His body began to contort and swell. Skin hardened into a thick, scaled hide. His face elongated into a snout full of dagger-like teeth, and his powerful horns grew even larger. In seconds, he had transformed into a monstrous, bipedal dinosaur, a perfect engine of destruction. He let out a deafening roar that shook the very sand. He charged, his speed shocking for a creature his size. He swung his massive, horned head like a club, aiming to decapitate Naruto in a single blow. Naruto vanished. He reappeared behind the charging dinosaur, a kunai in his hand, and slashed at the back of its leg. The blade, which could cut steel, sparked uselessly against the thick hide. Zaka's Zoan form was incredibly durable. "Is that all?" Zaka bellowed, spinning and lashing out with his powerful tail. Naruto leaped backward, easily avoiding the blow, which left a deep trench in the beach. The battle was joined. Naruto was faster, more agile, but Zaka's raw power and armored skin made him a difficult opponent. Every punch Naruto landed felt like hitting a mountain. He was testing him, gauging his strength, just as he had with Grogan's fleet. But this was different. This wasn't a faceless army, it was a singular, powerful foe. Just as the shinobi pirates were beginning to be pushed back by the sheer number of beast pirates, a new sound filled the air. It started as a single, clear note that cut through the cacophony of battle. On the deck of her ship, now lit up like a grand stage, Yuta stood before a microphone, her eyes closed. She began to sing. It wasn't one of her pop anthems or her reality-bending lullabies. It was something new, a song born from the conversation on the cliff. It was a song of resilience, of shared struggle, of unbreakable bonds. It was a fighting song. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Ishi, the jaguar mink, felt a surge of energy course through him. The fatigue from fighting a dozen men at once vanished. His movements became sharper, his electrocharged claws crackling with renewed power. He felt the presence of Gantu to his left, of his other comrades around him, not just as allies, but as extensions of his own will. Their lines solidified. The beast pirates, on the other hand, faltered. The music wasn't attacking them, but it was, distracting. It filled their heads with echoes of their defeat at Wano, the loss of their captain, the futility of their rage. Their attacks grew sloppy. Their bloodlust was diluted by a strange, encroaching melancholy. Zaka felt it too. The damned singing was getting on his nerves, making him feel sluggish, reminding him of his failure. "Shut that woman up," he roared. Naruto saw his chance. Yuta's song wasn't just a distraction, it was a force multiplier. It amplified the spirit of her allies and eroded the morale of her enemies. It was the ultimate support ability. A golden aura exploded around Naruto as he tapped into the first level of his Nine Tails chakra mode. His speed and strength amplified tenfold. He became a golden blur. "He's using my song," Yuta thought, her voice never wavering as she watched the battle. The notes poured out of her, weaving a tapestry of sound that enveloped the battlefield. "We're fighting together." Naruto appeared in front of Zaka, his hand crackling with blue energy. Rasengan. He slammed the sphere into the dinosaur's chest. This time, the attack had teeth. The spinning chakra ground against Zaka's armored hide, cracking it, sending the massive beast stumbling backward with a roar of pain. Impossible! Zaka bellowed, enraged. He charged again, his jaws snapping, but Naruto was too fast. He was everywhere at once, a golden comet leaving a trail of defeated pirates in his wake as he moved. He appeared above Zaka, a new Rasengan in his hand, this one larger and infused with the raw power of nature. Senpo, Otama Rasengan. Sage Art, Giant Rasengan. Empowered by Yuta's song, which seemed to harmonize with his own sage mode, the attack was overwhelming. He drove it down onto Zaka's back. The impact was titanic. It didn't just break the scales, it shattered the bone beneath. The colossal Carnotaurus crashed to the ground, the transformation failing, reverting to his heavily wounded human form. He lay in a crater, unconscious. The moment their leader fell, the morale of the remaining beast pirates shattered completely. Dazed by the music and terrified by Naruto's power, they threw down their weapons and surrendered. The battle was over. The song faded, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Naruto, his golden aura receding, walked over to the defeated pirates. He looked at them, then at Zaka's unconscious form. He could feel their despair, their lack of purpose. He saw not enemies, but lost men. "The battle is over," he announced, his voice carrying across the beach. "Your captain is defeated. You have a choice. The same one I offered him. You can take your ships and leave. Or you can stay, put down your swords for good, and help us build. Here, you will not be pirates. You will be neighbors. The choice is yours." He turned and walked away, leaving them to their decision. He had done his part. Yuta met him at the edge of the beach, her face flushed with adrenaline and exertion. "We did it," she breathed, a brilliant smile on her face. "It worked. My song." "Your song was amazing," Naruto said, his own smile returning, genuine and warm. "It was like I could feel everyone's strength joining with mine. We were all fighting as one." They stood there for a moment, in the aftermath of the battle, a shared victory between them. The connection forged on the cliff had been tempered in the fires of combat. It was no longer just understanding, it was synergy. A partnership. Neither of them noticed the small, almost invisible flicker of light from a clifftop far down the coast. There, a cloaked figure lowered a pair of sophisticated binoculars. The masked CP-0 agent stood motionless, processing what he had just witnessed. It was far worse than the demonstration against Grogan's fleet. That had been a display of overwhelming, singular power. This was different. This was exponential. He spoke into a small, encrypted communicator. "Report to Mary Geos. The Maelstrom King has an accomplice. The diva, Yuta. Her devil fruit ability, the Yuta no Mi, appears to act as a significant force multiplier for the anomaly's unclassified energy. It enhances the combat effectiveness of his allies and disrupts enemy morale on a wide scale. The synergy is alarming." He paused, reviewing the energy readings his device had captured. They spiked erratically whenever the diva's song swelled, seeming to resonate with the golden aura of the anomaly. "The song of the new era is not a performance," the agent continued, his voice cold and precise. "It is a weapon system. The potential for this combination to influence global events, to unite disparate factions under a single, charismatic banner, is absolute. The threat level has been reassessed. This is no longer just about a foreign power. This is about the birth of a new ideology, one with the power to enforce itself. Immediate, decisive action is recommended." The message traveled across the world in an instant, arriving in the hallowed, silent halls of Pangaea Castle. In a dark chamber, one of the 5 elders, a man with a chillingly calm demeanor and hands that seemed to be stitched together from mismatched pieces of skin, read the report on a flickering screen. He absorbed the data, the power, the mercy, the synergy, the song. His ancient eyes, which had seen centuries of history unfold, narrowed to slits. He saw not a pirate and a singer. He saw a heresy finding its voice, a disease finding its vector. He stood, his tall, imposing figure casting a long shadow. He walked to a wall and pressed a hidden panel. A section of the stonework slid away, revealing a single, ornate den mushi, one that was pitch black and seemed to absorb the light around it. It was a direct line, reserved for only the most critical of commands. He picked up the receiver. "The situation has evolved," he said, his voice a low, emotionless rumble that promised utter destruction. "The anomaly is no longer acting alone. The prophecy of the twin-mooned emissary, corrupting the new dawn, is beginning to take shape. Activate the wardens." He listened for a moment, his expression unchanging. "Their mandate is absolute," he concluded, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a death sentence for an entire island. "Silence the song. Erase the maelstrom." Chapter 3, Whispers from the Void Century. The days following the skirmish with the beast pirate remnant settled into a new kind of rhythm on Uzushio. The defeated pirates, faced with a choice between the uncertainty of the new world without a captain and the strange, conditional peace offered by Naruto, were a fractured group. About a third of them, the most bitter and proud, took their battered ships and vanished back into the maelstrom, spitting curses and promises of revenge that even they didn't seem to believe. The rest, leaderless and weary of a life that had brought them nothing but scars and servitude, chose to stay. They were disarmed, their weapons melted down and reforged into farming tools and construction materials by a lanky, long-armed man who, in a past life, had been a master weaponsmith for a corrupt kingdom. It was a poetic form of disarmament that Naruto appreciated. He put the former pirates to work, not as prisoners, but as laborers, tasking them with expanding the island's infrastructure. Their first project was ambitious, carving out new foundations for a larger residential district on the eastern side of the main island, a place where the rock was stubborn and the ground uneven. It was hard, humbling work. Men who had once prided themselves on their ability to swing a club now found their muscles aching from swinging a pickaxe. But something strange happened. Under the watchful, but not unkind, eyes of Naruto's shinobi pirates, they started to change. They were fed 3 good meals a day. They slept without fear of being culled by a drunken commander. When they collapsed from exhaustion, a woman with a gentle touch and an encyclopedic knowledge of herbal remedies would tend to their aches. It was a life devoid of glory, but it was also devoid of the constant, grinding terror they had accepted as normal. They were slowly, begrudgingly, becoming part of the community. Naruto oversaw the project with a hands-on approach, often working alongside them. He didn't use his overwhelming power to do the work for them, that would defeat the purpose. But he used his clones for precision tasks, stabilizing loose rock faces, marking out perfect right angles for foundations, and, most importantly, creating a network of tunnels to bring fresh water from the island's central mountain. It was during this excavation that a discovery was made. A shadow clone, tunneling deep beneath the planned site for the new town square, slammed its shovel against something that wasn't rock. It didn't ring like metal, nor did it crumble like stone. It was a dull, immovable thud. The clone dispelled, its memory and sensory information flooding back to the original Naruto, who was helping hoist a massive support beam on the surface. He paused, the beam held effortlessly over his head. "That's not right," Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind. "The geological survey your other clones did showed nothing but granite for another 200 meters down." "I know," Naruto thought back, setting the beam into place. "Something's down there. Something old." He excused himself from the work crew and made his way to the tunnel entrance. He created a dozen new clones, instructing them to dig carefully around the obstruction. Yuta, who had been watching the construction with a fascinated curiosity, saw him disappear into the earth and followed, her interest piqued. She found him in a freshly dug cavern, his clones using small trowels and brushes to clear dirt away from a colossal, dark gray cube that was embedded in the bedrock. The cube was massive, at least 30 feet on each side, and its surface was perfectly smooth except for the precise, elegant script that covered every inch of it. The characters were alien to Naruto, but he recognized the material. He had seen it before, in grainy pictures in a history book he'd found on a shipwreck. A stone that was utterly indestructible. A poneglyph, Yuta breathed, her eyes wide. She had read about them, of course. The forbidden stones that held the secrets of the lost century. To find one here, on this secret island, was unthinkable. What does it say? Naruto ran a hand over the cool, unyielding surface. I have no idea. This language, it's from a time long gone. He stood up, a thoughtful expression on his face. But I think I know someone who can read it. He left Yuta with a few clones for protection and vanished in a blur of speed. An hour later, he returned, but he was not alone. With him was a man so old he seemed to be made of little more than wrinkled parchment and bone. He was stooped with age, his back a permanent curve, and he leaned heavily on a gnarled wooden staff. His eyes, however, hidden behind thick, round spectacles, were bright and startlingly alert. This was Professor Olan, one of the first refugees Naruto had taken in, a man who had escaped the destruction of Ohara as a frightened young boy, clutching a forbidden book to his chest. He had lived a life in hiding, his knowledge a curse that could get him killed. On Uzushio, for the first time in decades, he was safe. When Olan saw the poneglyph, his breath hitched, and he took a shaky step back. Tears welled in his ancient eyes. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the characters, his fingers tracing the lines with a reverence that bordered on worship. It's a true poneglyph, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Not just a historical record, but one that speaks of the Great War itself. I never thought I would see another one. Can you read it, old man? Naruto asked gently. Olan straightened up as much as his bent spine would allow, a fire igniting in his gaze. Can I read it? He tapped his chest with a bony finger. Boy, I am one of the last living souls in this world who can. This is not just history, it is my people's legacy. It is their final, defiant scream against the silence. For the next several hours, the cavern was filled with the sound of Olan's quiet, raspy voice as he translated the ancient text. Naruto and Yuta listened, utterly captivated. The poneglyph did not speak of weapons or treasure. It told a story. It speaks of the final days of the Great War, Olan began, his finger tracing a line of text. The 20 kingdoms, with their unified might, were pushing back the forces of the Great Kingdom. The tide had turned. But it says here, the king of the Great Kingdom, a man whose name was Joy Boy, did not fight alone. He squinted, leaning closer. He had an ally. An emissary. That's the word it uses. An emissary from a twin moon star. It says this emissary wielded a power not of this world. A power that could give life to the earth, calm the rage of the seas, and connect the hearts of all living things. It calls this power, he paused, struggling with the pronunciation of the ancient word. Chakra. Naruto went completely still. Chakra. The word hit him like a physical blow. Yuta looked at him, seeing the shock on his face, and the pieces began to click into place. The power he used, the energy he had shared with her, it wasn't a devil fruit. It was something else entirely. Something ancient. Olan, oblivious to Naruto's internal turmoil, continued. This poneglyph describes the emissary's abilities in detail. The ability to create solid copies of himself. The power to summon and command the spirits of nature, becoming one with the world itself. He looked up from the stone, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. It describes what you call sage mode, Naruto. Perfectly. The implications were staggering. Naruto wasn't an anomaly, a freak accident thrown into this world by chance. He was, a return. A successor to a legacy he never knew existed. It goes on, Olan said, his voice trembling with the weight of his discovery. It says the emissary fought alongside Joy Boy, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. His power was used to protect civilians, to heal the land ravaged by the fighting, and to try and broker a peace. The 20 kingdoms, however, feared his power. They saw it as a foreign contagion, an unnatural force that defied the established order of the world. They branded it a heresy. Olin's finger moved to the last section of the script. This is the most important part. It is a direct address, a warning from the past. It says, the emissary's power is the power of life itself, a gift from the world tree of his home. It is not a power of destruction, but of understanding. Should another ever arrive from that distant star, know that he is not the herald of the end, but the echo of a friendship that once sought to unite the world. Do not fear him. Listen to him. Silence descended upon the cavern, thick and heavy with the dust of centuries. Naruto stared at the poneglyph, his mind racing. He wasn't just a powerful individual who had stumbled into a new dimension. His very existence was tied to the central, foundational conflict of this world. The Void Century wasn't just a lost history, it was his history, in a way he could never have imagined. So, Yuta said softly, breaking the silence. You're not the first. It seems not, Naruto murmured, a universe of questions swirling in his mind. Who was this emissary? Was he from Konoha? From his world? Was there a permanent gateway between their dimensions? Kid, Kurama's voice was uncharacteristically somber. This changes everything. You're not just an emperor fighting for territory anymore. You're a symbol. And this world's masters have a long memory. In the pristine, sun-drenched gardens of Mary Geos, a world away from the dusty cavern of Uzushio, that long memory was stirring. The 5 elders were convened in an emergency session, not in their usual grand chamber, but in a private, heavily guarded pagoda overlooking the world below. The atmosphere was grim. Before them, a holographic projection shimmered, displaying the full report from the CP-Aegis Zero agent, including energy readings, combat analysis, and the chilling synergy between Naruto and Yuta. He is just as the ancient texts described, said the bald, sword-wielding elder, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The ability to create sentient copies, the mastery over natural energy, it is the power of the heretic emissary. And now he has found his Song of Corruption, added the tall, blonde elder with the long mustache, his voice laced with disgust. The diva's power is a perfect catalyst. A means to spread his influence not through force, but through emotion. It's a far more insidious form of conquest. The shortest of the elders, the one with the large, spotted birthmark on his forehead, shook his head. The prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes. The return of the sun god, Nika, was the first sign. Now, the re-emergence of the foreign heresy. If they were to unite, the world as we have built it would be undone. They all turned to look at the 5th member, their unofficial leader. The man with the stitched-together hands, whose name was known only to them. He stood apart, staring not at the report, but at an ancient, leather-bound book that lay open on a stone lectern. The book was filled with elegant, hand-painted script and detailed illustrations. It was a forbidden text, one of the few that had survived the cleansing of the Void Century, preserved by the founders of the world government as a reminder of the enemy they had vanquished. He turned a page, revealing a detailed illustration. It depicted a towering, godlike figure with wild, laughing eyes and hair like fire, Joy Boy, in his Nika form. Standing beside him was another figure, smaller but radiating an aura of golden light, his features obscured but his form unmistakable to those who knew what they were looking for. He was surrounded by animal spirits and had 9 distinct, ethereal tails swirling behind him. You are all mistaken, the stitched-hand elder said, his voice a low, chilling monotone that commanded immediate silence. The other 4 turned to him, their expressions a mixture of surprise and deference. You speak of this, Naruto Uzumaki, as if he is merely a successor to the original emissary, he continued, his gaze fixed on the ancient text. You speak of him as a threat to our order. You are thinking too small. He traced the illustration of the golden figure with a stitched finger. The texts of our founders do not merely describe the emissary's power. They describe his philosophy. The belief that understanding can conquer hatred. The belief in the inherent goodness of people. The belief that bonds can overcome any obstacle. He looked up, his ancient, weary eyes boring into each of the other elders. Does that sound familiar? The other elders exchanged uneasy glances. It was the philosophy of dreamers and fools, the kind of sentiment they had spent 800 years systematically crushing. The original emissary did not corrupt Joy Boy, the stitched-hand elder declared, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. That is the lie we have told the world, the lie we have told ourselves to justify our actions. The truth is far more dangerous. He tapped the book. The truth is that the emissary's power of understanding resonated with Joy Boy's power of liberation. They amplified one another. The emissary's heresy was not that he was a foreign power, it was that he proved that our a priori, the divine right of kings, the foundation of our rule, was a lie. He showed that power could be born from bonds, not bloodlines. He closed the book with a heavy thud. This Naruto Uzumaki is not merely an echo of the past. He is a walking, breathing refutation of our entire existence. His power is not the true threat. His idealism is. It is a plague of the mind, and now he has found a singer to give it voice and spread it to the masses. He turned, his imposing figure silhouetted against the sky. My mission has never been to simply destroy a man. It is to perform a theological cleansing. Before this foreign power can make contact with the new Joy Boy, Luffy, before this disease of hope can infect the world, we must cut it out at its source. We must prove, once and for all, that such a philosophy leads only to ruin. His gaze became distant, cold, and filled with a fanatic certainty. The Celestial Wardens are not just a task force. They are an inquisition. Their purpose is not to kill Naruto Uzumaki. It is to break him. To break his spirit, to shatter his ideals, and to make him a living monument to the failure of his own beliefs. We will turn his sanctuary into a tomb and his song of hope into a funeral dirge. We will make the world watch as we demonstrate what happens to those who dare to offer a different kind of dawn. The other elders were silent, caught in the gravity of his conviction. His was not just the anger of a ruler whose power was challenged. It was the righteous fury of a high priest whose God had been blasphemed. His crusade was not political, it was holy. Back in the cavern on Uzushio, the weight of the revelation settled on Naruto. He wasn't just a refugee anymore. He was a piece of a puzzle he never knew existed, a living link to a forbidden history. Yuta, ever perceptive to the emotions of others, saw the conflict in his eyes. "This is a good thing, isn't it?" she asked, her voice soft. "It means you belong here. More than you knew." Naruto looked at her, then at the poneglyph. "It means I've been drafted into a war that started 800 years before I was born," he replied, a grim smile touching his lips. "It means the world government isn't just going to see me as another pirate emperor. They're going to see me as a ghost they thought they'd already buried." Professor Olin, having finished his translation, was now painstakingly copying the text into a notebook, his hands moving with a newfound urgency. "This changes everything we thought we knew about the Void Century," he muttered, more to himself than to them. "The narrative has always been that the 20 kingdoms united to destroy a tyrannical, warmongering empire. But this paints a picture of a philosophical war. A war of ideas." He looked up at Naruto, his old eyes sharp. "And they have just discovered that their oldest idea has come back to haunt them." As if on cue, Naruto's sage mode, which he had kept active at a low level, flared in his senses. It was a faint but sharp pinprick, a distortion far out at sea. It wasn't a fleet of ships. It wasn't a living creature. It was something else. Something cold, technological, and utterly silent. "What's wrong?" Yuta asked, seeing his expression change. Something's out there, Naruto said, his gaze turning distant. In the maelstrom. A scout. But it's not like the marine ship from before. This one is, cloaked. It feels like it's trying to hide from the world itself. He focused his senses, pushing his sensory range to its absolute limit. He felt the life energy of the sea kings, the churn of the currents, the static electricity of the storm clouds, and then, a void. A small bubble of nothing, moving stealthily through the tempest. It was a vessel designed to have no presence, to be invisible not just to sight, but to abilities like observation hockey. But it couldn't hide from the life energy of the entire planet. To Sage Mode, a void was as conspicuous as a bonfire. They're getting more cautious, Kurama noted. They know you can sense them now. They're adapting. Let them, Naruto murmured, a dangerous glint in his eyes. He raised a hand, and a small, perfect sphere of sage chakra, no bigger than a marble, formed in his palm. It looked like a miniature sun. If they want to watch, let's give them a show. With a flick of his finger, he sent the tiny sphere of energy shooting upward. It passed through the hundreds of feet of rock above them as if it wasn't there, breached the surface, and soared into the sky, climbing higher and higher until it was a tiny, invisible speck. It shot past the cloud cover, past the storm wall, and positioned itself directly above the cloaked vessel miles away. Then, Naruto clenched his fist. Miles out at sea, the bubble of nothingness that was the celestial warden scout ship suddenly found itself bathed in an intense, pure light. The void sphere, as Naruto called it, had expanded into a massive, stationary sun, dispelling the storm clouds in a perfect, 5-mile radius and illuminating the sleek, black submersible with unforgiving brilliance. Its advanced stealth field flickered and died, overloaded by the sheer density of the natural energy. On the bridge of the scout ship, alarms blared. The warden agent, a stoic woman with cybernetic eyes, stared at the impossible sun hanging in the sky above her. Report, she snapped. Stealth field compromised. All systems are operational, but we are completely exposed. The energy signature is, its pure nature. It's him. He's pinpointed our exact location from his island. The agent's cybernetic eyes zoomed in on the distant island, but she could see nothing but the storm. He hadn't attacked them. He hadn't destroyed them. He had simply, revealed them. It was a power move of breathtaking arrogance and confidence. It was a statement. I see you. I know you're there. And you can do nothing to hide from me. Our mission is observation only, the agent said, her voice tight with forced calm. We have what we came for. Transmit the data on the Poneglyph's discovery and this, demonstration. Then, pull back. Immediately. The submersible dove, but the light followed, penetrating the depths. They were a goldfish in a bowl, and Naruto was watching. Back in the cavern, Naruto lowered his hand, a smirk playing on his lips. The distant sun he had created faded, and the storm reclaimed the sea. He had sent his own message back to the shadowy figures who were watching him. Yuta stared at him, a look of awe on her face. He hadn't just sensed an enemy, he had toyed with them from miles away, using a level of precision and power that was simply beyond comprehension. They know we found the Poneglyph, Naruto stated, his expression turning serious again. And now they know. That I know they're watching. The quiet days are over. He looked from the Poneglyph to Yuta, to the memory of the aged Olan's face, and thought of the town above them, full of people who were just learning how to live again. His fight for a quiet corner of the world had just intersected with an ancient, cosmic war. He was no longer just a protector. He was a player in a game that would decide the fate of the next era. And he, Naruto Uzumaki, had never been one to sit on the sidelines. Chapter 4, The Admiral's Justice Fleet. Admiral Sakazuki slammed a fist onto his desk, the volcanic force of the blow cracking the thick, polished mahogany. The two unfortunate marine officers standing before him flinched, sweat beading on their brows. The air in the office at the new Marine headquarters was thick with the scent of cigar smoke and simmering rage. Unacceptable, Sakazuki growled, the sound like grinding stones. His gaze was fixed on a massive screen displaying a looped video, a golden blur of energy dismantling a dinosaur-sized man while a girl's song seemed to amplify the chaos. A fifth emperor has risen, flaunting a power we cannot classify. He has made a mockery of a 780 million berry pirate, sheltered the remnants of Kaido's crew, and now we have reports from CPH-0 of a poneglyph on his island. He is a walking powder keg of sedition, and he is doing it all in a territory that was, until recently, considered a death trap. He pointed a thick, scarred finger at the screen. And this. He located and exposed a state-of-the-art Celestial Warden stealth vessel. This Maelstrom King is not just powerful, he's brazen. He is spitting in the face of the world government. One of the officers, a captain with more courage than sense, spoke up. Fleet Admiral, our hands are tied. The Gorosei have classified the target as an anomaly and invoked the Warden Protocol. They have forbidden direct marine intervention. They claim it is a matter of internal security, not piracy. Sakazuki's eyes, shadowed by his cap, glowed with a dangerous, molten light. The Gorosei sit in their castle and play their political games. I am responsible for maintaining order in the world. And a fifth emperor is a fundamental threat to that order. If their secret agents cannot handle this, then the Marines will. He blew a cloud of acrid smoke. I will not sit idly by while another renegade faction carves out a kingdom for itself. He stabbed a button on his intercom. Send in Vice Admiral Jensen. The two officers visibly stiffened. Vice Admiral Iron Fist Jensen was a name that carried immense weight in the New World. He was a rising star, a man whose meteoric ascent through the ranks was matched only by his fanatical devotion to the principle of absolute justice. He was younger than the other admirals, more dynamic, but his ideology was as unyielding as Sakazuki's own. He was the fleet admiral's prized protégé, the future of his vision for the Marines. The doors opened and Jensen strode in. He was a tall, powerfully built man with short, black hair and a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite. He wore a standard vice admiral's coat over a simple black t-shirt, his arms, corded with muscle, bare to the shoulder. His knuckles were dark and calloused, as if he had spent a lifetime punching through steel. His presence was one of immense, contained power. He snapped a salute, his form perfect. Fleet Admiral. Sakazuki gestured to the screen. Jensen. You are familiar with the situation in the unnavigable sea. I am, sir, Jensen replied, his voice a deep, steady baritone. The Maelstrom King, Naruto Uzumaki. Possessor of an unclassified ability. Has established a sanctuary for pirates, escaped slaves, and other criminals. His summary was concise and damning. The Gorosei have tied my hands, Sakazuki said, his tone dripping with contempt. They believe their secret squads can handle this. They are wrong. This requires a statement. A demonstration of what happens when someone so flagrantly defies the rule of law. He leaned forward, his glowing eyes locking onto Jensen's. I am authorizing a training exercise. A full-scale Buster Call demonstration. Your target will be the islands at the center of the Maelstrom territory. Jensen's eyes, which had been as hard and calm as obsidian, lit up with a fervent fire. A Buster Call. The ultimate expression of the world government's military might. 10 warships, 5 vice admirals, and the authority to wipe an island off the map without question. It was the embodiment of absolute justice. I am also granting you temporary command of the Science Division's new flagship, the Judicator, Sakazuki continued. It is equipped with the latest generation of Sea-Prism stone weaponry and long-range energy dampeners. Vegapunk's toys. They may prove effective against this chakra nonsense. He paused, letting the weight of the command settle. Your objective is total annihilation. Eradicate the pirate sanctuary. Capture the Maelstrom King, if possible. Eliminate him, if necessary. And remind the world that there are only 4 emperors. Is that clear, Vice Admiral? Jensen's face was a mask of unwavering resolve. It is, Fleet Admiral. Evil that is allowed to fester becomes a plague. We will be the cure. He saluted again, spun on his heel with military precision, and marched out, his purpose absolute. Sakazuki watched him go, a rare, grim smile touching his lips. Kizaru was too passive, Fujitora was a bleeding heart, and Green Bull was a loose cannon. But Jensen understood. He was a hammer, and he saw every problem as a nail. And the Maelstrom King was a nail that was about to be driven deep into the earth. Peace on Uzushio was a fragile, beautiful thing. For 2 weeks after the discovery of the Poneglyph, it held. The former beast pirates, under the leadership of a chastened but surprisingly pragmatic Zaka, who Naruto had personally healed and then put in charge of the labor force, worked with a grudging efficiency. The foundations for the new district were laid. Yuta spent her days among the people, her music no longer just for performance, but for community. She played soft melodies in the makeshift schoolhouse, helping the children learn. She sang work shanties with the construction crews, her voice turning grueling labor into a shared, rhythmic effort. She and Naruto were inseparable. They walked the cliffs in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories of his world, of tailed beasts and ninja villages, of ramen and rivalries. She told him of her travels, of the emptiness of fame and her complicated relationship with her father, Shanks. A deep, unspoken bond was forming between them, a quiet understanding that needed no grand declarations. It was in the way he would appear with a warm cup of tea when he sensed she was feeling sad, or the way she would start humming a specific tune that perfectly matched his mood. 1 afternoon, they were sitting in the town square, watching the children play. Naruto was attempting to teach a group of them the basics of the leaf concentration exercise, to little success. Most of the kids ended up with leaves stuck to their noses and foreheads, collapsing into fits of giggles. Naruto, covered in more leaves than any of them, was laughing right along with them. Yuta watched him, a soft smile on her face. This was the man the world called an emperor. This was the powerhouse who had leveled an armada. And here he was, acting like a giant, overgrown child to make a few orphans laugh. The contrast was everything. It was then that his laughter died. He sat up straight, his head tilting toward the sea, a leaf falling from his spiky hair. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of cold, hard steel. "What is it?" Yuta asked, the playful atmosphere evaporating. Naruto stood up, dusting the leaves off his pants. "Company," he said, his voice dangerously low. "A lot of it." His sage mode was screaming at him. 10 massive signatures, moving in a precise, military formation, were approaching his storm wall. They weren't trying to be stealthy. They were announcing themselves. It was the signature of a buster call. "Kaito. Ishii." Naruto's voice boomed across the square, all trace of playfulness gone. His 2 most trusted lieutenants were at his side in an instant. "It's the Marines. A buster call fleet. Initiate Protocol Uzushio. Get everyone into the Poneglyph cavern. Now." Protocol Uzushio was the doomsday plan they had all dreaded but drilled for relentlessly. The Poneglyph chamber, being deep underground and made of indestructible material, was the perfect bomb shelter. The alarm, a deep, resonant bell, began to toll across the island. The peaceful scene shattered. Parents scooped up their children, people dropped what they were doing and ran, not in a panic, but with a trained urgency, heading for the hidden entrance to the subterranean network. Zaka, the former beast pirate, appeared, his face grim. "What are your orders?" Naruto looked at him, then at the former pirates who had gathered, armed with their new pickaxes and shovels. "Your choice is the same as always, Zaka. You can hide with the others, or you can fight for the home you've helped build." Sokka looked at the town, at the framework of the new houses they had just started to erect. He looked at the terror in the eyes of the families running for shelter. He remembered the capricious cruelty of Kaido, the lawless chaos of his old life. He spat on the ground. My men and I didn't bust our backs for 2 weeks just to let some government dogs wreck the place. We'll fight. Naruto nodded. Good. Help the shinobi pirates with the evacuation. No one gets left behind. Yuta ran to Naruto's side, her face pale but resolute. I'm coming with you. No, Naruto said, his voice firm but not unkind. Your song is a weapon of morale. Down there, with the people, it's a shield for their spirit. Keep them calm. Keep them from despairing. That's your battlefield today. She wanted to argue, but she saw the iron certainty in his eyes. He was right. Her role wasn't on the front line this time. She squeezed his hand. Don't you dare lose. He gave her a quick, confident grin. Never have. Not planning on starting today. He watched her run toward the shelters before turning to the sea. His expression hardened. A buster call was indiscriminate. It was the logic of a forest fire used to kill a wolf. It was the justice of fools. And it was aimed at his home. The 10 marine battleships breached the storm wall, sailing into the calm sea with an arrogance born of overwhelming firepower. They formed a perfect semicircle around the main island, their cannons, hundreds of them, all taking aim at the town. On the central bridge of the flagship, the colossal, high-tech Judicator, Vice Admiral Genzen stood with 4 other vice admirals. All ships are in position, sir, an officer reported. Energy dampening field is active. It should disrupt any large-scale devil fruit or hockey-based phenomena. Genzen stared at the peaceful, idyllic island. A den of pirates and criminals, masquerading as a paradise. It's a mockery of everything we stand for. He raised a hand. All ships. Open fire. Leave nothing standing. The order was given. But just as the gunners were about to act, a voice echoed across the water, amplified by a wind that seemed to carry it directly to each ship. I'd think twice about that if I were you. Naruto stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea, the same spot where he had shared a sunset with Yuta. He was alone, a single orange and black figure against the vast might of the marine fleet. Genzen smirked. The target has revealed himself. Arrogant to the last. Ignore him. Fire on the town. His spirit will break when he sees his precious sanctuary burn. I'm not asking you, Naruto's voice called out again, a dangerous edge to it now. I'm warning you. He slammed his hands together in a seal Genzen had never seen. Sage art, amphibian transformation. The sea itself began to move. The calm, turquoise water around the marine fleet started to churn, to bubble. The vice admirals looked over their railings in confusion. The water level was dropping, as if a giant plug had been pulled from the seabed. Then they saw it. The entire circular sea, miles in diameter, was being drawn inward, swirling around the central island like water in a bowl. Naruto was using his sage chakra, resonating with the natural energy of the ocean, to literally reshape his territory. What is this? One of the vice admirals, a giant named Enigmo, demanded. What's he doing? The swirling water began to rise, forming a colossal, spinning wall of water around Uzushio, a liquid fortress that towered over the battleships. It wasn't a wave, it was a controlled, sustained whirlpool, turned on its side. In seconds, the marine fleet was trapped between the outer storm wall and a new, inner maelstrom. Their target was now completely obscured behind a roaring vortex of seawater. Genzen's eyes widened in disbelief. He's using the ocean as a shield. All cannons, fire through it. Blast it apart. Hundreds of cannons roared, firing into the liquid wall. The cannonballs vanished into the churning water, their momentum instantly absorbed and dissipated by the millions of tons of swirling liquid. It was like trying to shoot a hurricane with a pistol. On the judicator, Genzen gritted his teeth. This changes nothing. He can't hide in there forever. He has only delayed the inevitable. Send in the pacifista units. Have them march ashore and engage him directly. I will deal with him myself. But there was nowhere to march ashore. The water had been pulled away from the fleet, leaving them sitting in a shallow, muddy basin. Naruto appeared on the surface of the water just outside the vortex, his arms crossed. "All right, Marines," he said, his voice calm. "The civilians are safe. The island is shielded. Now it's just you and me. Let's talk." Genzen stared at the lone man who had just neutralized a Buster Call's primary strategy in less than a minute. The anger in his chest was a blazing inferno. This man's power was a perversion of the natural order. "There is nothing to talk about, pirate," Genzen roared, his voice carrying across the water. "You are a criminal who has defied the world government. Your existence is a crime. Justice must be absolute." With that, he leaped. He launched himself from the deck of the judicator, soaring across the hundreds of meters separating them. As he flew, his body changed. It turned into crimson, bubbling magma, the heat so intense it boiled the shallow water beneath him into steam. He was a user of the Magu Magu no Mi, a logia of incredible destructive power, a more controlled but equally deadly version of his mentor, Sakazuki. "Then let's see whose justice is stronger." Naruto yelled back, a golden aura of Ninetales chakra flaring to life around him. He met Genzen's charge head-on. Genzen threw a punch, his fist a comet of molten rock. Great eruption. Naruto formed a Rasengan in an instant, meeting the blow. Chakra and magma collided. The resulting explosion was immense, a blast of steam and concussive force that rocked the entire fleet. The two men were thrown back, both unharmed. The real battle had begun. It was a clash of titans, a battle of ideologies given physical form. Genzen was relentless, a force of pure, zealous destruction. He launched volley after volley of magma fists, turned the sea bed into a volcanic minefield, and rained down molten rock from above. "You protect scum," he screamed, his face contorted with righteous fury. "Thieves, murderers, enemies of the people. They deserve judgment, not sanctuary." Naruto, a blur of golden light, moved with a grace that seemed impossible. He deflected, he dodged, he countered. He was fighting on a level Genzen had never encountered. This wasn't the brawling of a Yonko or the refined swordsmanship of a master. It was a fluid, adaptable, and brutally efficient martial art. "I protect people." Naruto yelled back, blocking a magma tendril with an arm coated in chakra. What justice is there in a system that allows celestial dragons to buy and sell people like cattle? What order is there in a world where an island can be erased because its scholars learned the truth? You don't serve justice. You serve a corrupt, broken system. His words were like daggers, striking at the cracks Genzen had long ignored in his own zealous worldview. He had seen the depravity of the celestial dragons. He had heard the whispers about O'Hara. But he had pushed it all down, subsumed it under the banner of absolute justice. The system wasn't perfect, but it was all that stood between the world and total chaos. Lies and propaganda from a pirate. Genzen roared, unleashing his most powerful attack. His entire body transformed into a massive, volcanic dragon. Meteor volcano. He blasted a meteor shower of massive magma bombs at Naruto. It was the kind of attack that could devastate a city. Naruto didn't flinch. He brought his hands together. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 100 clones appeared, fanning out around him. Each clone began forming a Rasengan. "You want to see what real justice looks like?" Naruto roared, as he and his clones leaped into the air. "It's the power to protect everyone you care about." The clones met the magma bombs head-on, their Rasengans neutralizing the molten rock in brilliant flashes of blue and red. In the center of it all, the real Naruto was forming a new kind of attack. He created a Rasengan, then infused it with the power of wind chakra. A terrifying, high-pitched shriek filled the air as four massive, blade-like points of wind erupted from the sphere. Futon, Rasen Shuriken. He threw it. The spinning shuriken of wind flew at Genzen's magma dragon form, not with the force of a bomb, but with the precision of a scalpel. It struck the dragon in the chest. There was a moment of silence. Then, a storm of microscopic wind blades erupted from the point of impact, slicing through the magma on a cellular level. Genzen screamed, a sound of pure agony, as his Logia form was being shredded from the inside out. The energy of his devil fruit was being disrupted at its very source. The massive magma dragon dissolved, not into smoke or ash, but into a shower of inert, cooling rock. Genzen, back in his human form, fell from the sky, his body covered in thousands of tiny, non-lethal cuts. He was defeated. Utterly. Naruto appeared below him, catching him before he could hit the ground. He landed softly, holding the unconscious Vice Admiral in his arms. He had been pushed, truly pushed, for the first time in a long while. Genzen was strong, maybe even on the level of a full admiral. But his justice was brittle. Naruto laid him gently on the deck of the Judicator, in front of the stunned and terrified other Vice Admirals and crew. Genzen was alive, breathing, his life force intact. The water wall around Uzushio subsided, returning the sea to its placid calm. The island was untouched. The sun shone on the pristine town as if nothing had happened. Naruto stood on the deck of the enemy flagship, surrounded by thousands of marines, and he showed no fear. He looked at the other four vice admirals, his golden aura faded but his presence still immense. "Your brand of justice failed today," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the entire ship. "You brought a weapon designed to wipe out an entire population, and you aimed it at families. At children. All in the name of order." He turned his gaze to Genzen's unconscious form. "He has strength. But his heart is chained to a flawed ideal. Tell him, when he wakes up." Naruto paused, his blue eyes filled with a strange mixture of pity and challenge. "Tell him to come back when he's found a justice worth fighting for. One that protects the innocent instead of just punishing the guilty." With that, he vanished in a flicker of movement, leaving the entire Buster Call fleet sitting in his calm, silent sea. He didn't destroy them. He didn't sink them. He simply left them with their defeat, a far more powerful statement than any act of destruction. On the bridge of the Judicator, the remaining vice admirals were speechless. They had come with overwhelming force, with the full backing of the world government, to enforce its will. And they had been defeated, lectured, and then dismissed by a single man. Hours later, Genzen awoke in the ship's infirmary. His body ached, but he was alive. The words of the Maelstrom King, relayed to him by a shaken subordinate, echoed in his mind. "Come back when you found a justice worth fighting for." He clenched his fists, the dark, calloused knuckles turning white. He had dedicated his life to absolute justice. He had believed in it with every fiber of his being. But today, he had seen that his hammer of justice had been aimed at a playground. And he had been stopped by a man who spoke of protecting people, a man who had the power to annihilate them all but chose not to. For the first time in his life, Vice Admiral Iron Fist Genzen felt the cold, creeping chill of doubt. His ironclad worldview had just been struck by a Rasen Shuriken, and it was beginning to fracture. The news of the Buster Call's failure was a seismic shock to the world government. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an ideological catastrophe. The Maelstrom King hadn't just won a battle. He had won an argument. And in a world held together by perception, that was infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 5, The Red-Haired Shadow. The defeat of a Buster Call was not an event that could be hidden. The world government tried, of course. The official report, heavily doctored by the highest echelons in Mary Geos, stated that the training Exercise in the New World had been suspended due to unforeseen and extreme weather phenomena unique to the Maelstrom territory. It was a flimsy, transparent lie, and no one believed it. The truth, as it always did in the age of information pirates, leaked out. Whispers from demoralized Marines on the returning fleet, reports from CP-0 spies monitoring other pirate crews, and the simple, undeniable fact that Yuzashio was still standing, it all painted a picture that Morgans, the news tycoon, couldn't resist. A new, sensational headline rocked the world: Buster Call broken. Fifth Emperor halts Marine juggernaut single-handedly. Is the world government's power waning? The article was accompanied by 2 images. One was a grainy, long-distance shot of the 10 battleships sitting uselessly in a churning, artificial whirlpool. The other, far more impactful, was a sketch based on a Marine's testimony, Naruto Uzumaki, standing alone on the deck of the Judicator, looking down on the defeated form of Vice Admiral Genzen. It was an image of absolute dominance, tempered by mercy. Naruto's reputation skyrocketed. He was no longer just a powerful anomaly, he was a symbol of defiance, a king in his own right who could turn back the world government's strongest conventional weapon. On Yuzashio, life returned to its peaceful rhythm, but something had shifted. The people, having faced the specter of total annihilation and survived, were changed. Their trust in Naruto, already strong, had become something akin to absolute faith. The former beast pirates, who had stood ready to defend their new home, were now fully integrated, their past allegiances burned away in the face of a shared crisis. Zaka, the Carnotaurus man, now walked through the town not as a defeated warlord, but as a respected, if gruff, foreman, his roars now directed at lazy workers, not enemies. Naruto, however, felt no triumph. He stood on the cliffs, watching the maelstrom churn, a deep unease settling in his gut. You should be celebrating, Kit, Kurama noted from within. You humiliated them. Sent them running with their tails between their legs. I didn't want to fight them, Kurama, Naruto thought back, his brow furrowed. Genzen, he's strong. He believes in what he's doing. He's just pointing his strength in the wrong direction. Fighting men like that is a waste. He should be an ally, not an enemy. You and your obsession with turning enemies into friends, the fox grumbled. It's going to get you killed one day. It's what I'm good at, Naruto replied simply. His thoughts were interrupted by Yuta's arrival. She came and stood beside him, her presence a silent comfort. She didn't need to ask what he was thinking. She could feel the conflict rolling off him, a stark contrast to the celebratory mood in the town below. You're worried, she said. It wasn't a question. They sent a buster call, he said, his voice low. It was a test. A blunt, brutal one. Now they know what I can do. The next time they come, they won't be so straightforward. They'll be smarter. More ruthless. He clenched his fists. And I can't protect this place forever just by being strong. A fortress wall will always be tested. What I need, is for the world to accept Yuzushio's right to exist. I need political power, not just physical. Yuta looked out at the sea. The other emperors. Kaido and Big Mom are gone. That leaves Luffy, Buggy, and my father. Her voice held a complex mix of affection and frustration when she mentioned his name. Naruto glanced at her. Red-haired Shanks. What's he really like? Yuta sighed, a sound like the wind rustling through leaves. He's, like a storm you can't predict. One minute he's goofy, drinking and singing off-key, and the next, he has a look in his eyes that could stop the sea itself. He's kind, but he left me. He preaches freedom, but his very existence maintains a status quo that causes so much suffering. He's the most powerful man I've ever known, and the biggest idiot. She gave a wry smile. He's my father. Before Naruto could respond, his sage mode flared, not with the hostile intent of a marine fleet, but with a presence so immense, so overwhelming, it was like a sun rising on the horizon. It was a singular signature, but its weight was greater than the entire Buster Call fleet combined. A colossal, silent pressure was descending on his territory. Naruto's body tensed. Yuta felt the shift in the air, a sudden heaviness that made it hard to breathe. Even the birds in the trees fell silent. "What is that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a dawning, familiar dread. Naruto stared out at the maelstrom, his own formidable aura rising to meet the approaching pressure. He could feel it now, a will so powerful it was bending the world around it. It wasn't hostile, not exactly. But it was challenging. Probing. "It's him, isn't it?" Naruto asked, his voice steady. A massive ship, its dark red hull seeming to drink the light, emerged from the storm wall. It sailed into the calm sea with an authority that dwarfed even the marine battleships. A single dragon-headed figurehead stared forward, its expression serene and powerful. At its mast, a flag fluttered, a skull with 2 crossed sabers and 3 distinctive red claw marks over one eye. The Red Force had arrived. On the deck of the ship, the crew of the Red Hair Pirates, Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, Yasop, and the others, watched the island with keen interest. But they stayed back. This was the captain's business. Shanks stood alone at the prow, his black cape billowing behind him. He wore his usual loose white shirt and cropped pants. His straw hat, the very same one now worn by Monkey D. Luffy, was gone, leaving his iconic red hair to be ruffled by the breeze. His gaze was fixed on the 2 figures standing on the cliff. Yuta felt a lump form in her throat. "Dad," Naruto put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay here. This is something I have to do alone." He didn't wait for an answer. He leaped from the cliff, landing silently on the beach below, and began to walk toward the water's edge. There was no army at his back, no clones, no visible display of power. Just him. Shanks mirrored the action. With an effortless leap, he cleared the distance from his ship to the shore, landing with a soft crunch of sand. The 2 most talked about men in the world now stood 50 paces apart on a deserted beach, the calm sea lapping gently at their feet. The air was electric, thick with unspoken power. Shanks was the first to speak, his voice casual, yet carrying an undeniable weight. "So, you're the one causing all the ruckus. The Maelstrom King." He had a disarming smile on his face, but his eyes were sharp, analytical, missing nothing. "And you're the man who gave a rubber kid a hat and changed the world," Naruto replied, his tone equally calm. "Red-haired Shanks." Shanks's smile widened. "I heard you gave one of Sakazuki's prized mutts a spanking. Must have bruised his ego something fierce." "He aimed cannons at children," Naruto said, his voice losing its casual edge. "His ego was the least of my concerns." The pleasantries were over. The air crackled. Without a word, without a movement, they both unleashed their will. It wasn't a physical attack. It was something far more primal. Shanks's legendary conqueror's haki flooded the beach, a wave of pure, absolute dominance. The very air seemed to solidify. The sand vibrated. Weak-willed fish in the shallows flopped onto the beach, their minds overloaded. It was the spirit of a king, a presence that screamed, "I am here, and the world will bend to my will." But it met a wall. Naruto's own aura erupted to meet it. It wasn't haki. It was a raw, golden manifestation of his life force and Kurama's, a blend of Sage Mode's natural harmony and the Ninetales' indomitable spirit. It was the presence of a savior and a demon, a hero who had stared into the abyss and made it blink. It didn't scream for dominance, it stated a fact: "I am here, and I will not be moved." The 2 invisible forces collided in the space between them. A line appeared in the sand, cracking and splitting as if struck by lightning. The sky above them seemed to darken, the clouds themselves pushed back by the sheer spiritual pressure. On the cliff, Yuta stumbled back, gasping, feeling the colossal weight of the 2 wills pressing down on her. Ishii and Gantu appeared at her side, their own faces strained, helping her stay upright. Unbelievable, Ishii breathed, his fur standing on end. I've felt the captain's haki before, but this is different. It's like two typhoons colliding. On the beach, neither man moved. They simply stared at each other, a silent conversation taking place in the clash of their spirits. They were testing each other's resolve, their conviction, the very foundations of their souls. Shanks's haki was the will of a man who roamed free, who answered to no one. Naruto's aura was the will of a man who protected everything, who bore the weight of 1,000 bonds. For a full minute, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. Shanks let out a hearty laugh, the pressure vanishing instantly. The sun seemed to shine brighter. The tension evaporated. Ha 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 ha. Incredible. So that's the power they're all so scared of. It feels warm. Not like any haki I've ever felt. Naruto's golden aura receded, the oppressive pressure lifting. He gave a slight, acknowledging nod. Yours isn't so bad either. For a second there, I thought the sky was going to fall. The test was over. Respect had been earned. Shanks walked forward, his posture relaxed, and extended his remaining hand. They say you have my daughter shacking up with you. I figured I should come and meet the man who's got more guts than the world government. Naruto shook his hand. Shanks's grip was firm, like iron. She's not a prisoner, if that's what you're worried about. She came here on her own. She's welcome to stay as long as she likes. I can see that, Shanks said, his gaze flicking up to the cliff where Yuta stood. He gave a small wave, a gesture that was both a father's greeting and an apology. Yuta didn't wave back, but she didn't turn away either. Shanks turned back to Naruto, his expression growing more serious. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here because you've kicked the biggest hornet's nest in the world, and I'm not sure you know what you've stumbled into. He gestured up the beach. You got any of that sake I hear your people make? This is going to be a long conversation. Naruto led Shanks into the town. The townsfolk stared in awe at the legendary emperor, but seeing him walking peacefully with their own leader, they kept a respectful distance. Naruto took him not to a grand hall, but to the small, open-air ramen stand that a clone of his had built, a perfect replica of his favorite spot back in Konoha. He ordered 2 bowls and a large bottle of the island's best sake. They sat at the counter, 2 of the most powerful men in the world, slurping noodles like old friends. This place you've built, Shanks said, after downing a large gulp of sake. It's the kind of thing dreamers talk about. But dreams have a nasty way of getting shattered in the new world. I'm not much of a dreamer, Naruto replied, finishing his noodles. I'm a builder. And I'm very good at protecting what I build. I don't doubt it, Shanks said, his tone grim. But you're not just fighting Marines. The Buster Call, that was Sakazuki going off the leash. Your real enemy is far more dangerous. They don't operate in the light. They're the ones who pull the strings from the shadows of Mary Geos. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The Gorosei. Shanks nodded. And the one they answer to. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so low that only Naruto could hear him. There is a king of the world, hidden from sight. A silent sovereign who sits on the empty throne. Their name is Imu. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. A secret king. The ultimate power behind the world government. It explained the fanaticism, the absolute control. The poneglyph we found, it mentioned the 20 kingdoms fighting against an emissary from another world who was allied with Joy Boy, Naruto said, deciding to share his own intelligence. It was a risk, but this was a moment for trust. Shanks' eye widened slightly. He clearly hadn't known that detail. So, the legends are true. I always suspected your power felt different. Ancient. That explains their paranoia. They're not just afraid of you as a rival emperor. They're afraid of you as a piece of history they thought they had erased. They're afraid you'll side with the new Joy Boy. Monkey D. Luffy, Naruto stated. Shanks confirmed. His devil fruit, the Gomu Gomu no Mi, is not what it seems. It's a Zoan. A mythical one. The Hito Hito no Mi, model, Nika. The sun god. The warrior of liberation. The very god that Joy Boy was said to embody. The world government has been trying to get its hands on that fruit for 800 years, and it has always eluded them. Now, it's awakened in my anchor, Luffy. The pieces were all slotting into place. The return of Joy Boy's power in Luffy. The return of the emissary's power in him. Two ancient, allied forces, reappearing in the world at the same time. No wonder the secret rulers were panicking. They see you and Luffy as two parts of a prophecy they've been dreading for centuries, Shanks continued, his voice heavy with warning. They won't send another buster call. That's a tool for pirates. Against you, they'll use their real weapons. The celestial wardens you've already met are just the beginning. They have access to forbidden technologies, ancient knowledge, things that can unmake a man, body and soul. They won't rest until you are erased, not just from the world, but from history itself, just like your predecessor. He finished his sake and placed the cup down with a definitive click. I'm telling you this for two reasons. First, for Yuta's sake. She's found something good here. I won't let it be destroyed by ghosts of the past. Second, because you're doing something I never could. You're not just waiting for the new era, you're building a piece of it, right here and now. And that makes you a vital piece on the board, whether you like it or not. He stood up, his visit concluded. My advice? Be prepared. They're coming for you. And they won't announce themselves next time. Shanks walked back toward the beach, his crew already preparing the Red Force to depart. He paused and looked back at Naruto. One last thing, he said. Yuta, she's got a good heart. Too good for this world, sometimes. Her dream of a perfect genesis, it comes from a place of deep pain. Don't let her lose her way in it. Naruto nodded. Understanding the weight of the father's request. I won't. Shanks gave a final, approving nod and then turned to the cliff where Yuta was still watching. He didn't say a word. He just smiled, a genuine, warm, fatherly smile, before leaping back onto his ship. As the Red Force sailed away, retreating back into the maelstrom, Yuta finally came down to the beach. She stood next to Naruto, watching the ship disappear. He told you, didn't he? She asked quietly. About Imu. About Luffy. About how much danger you're really in. He did, Naruto confirmed. The conversation had been sobering. It had laid bare the true scale of the conflict he was embroiled in. He was no longer just defending an island. He was fighting against 800 years of carefully constructed lies and the shadowy organization that would do anything to protect them. But strangely, he didn't feel fear. He felt clarity. He finally understood the battlefield. He looked at Yuta, at her conflicted expression, and thought of Shanks's final warning. He reached out and gently took her hand. He also told me to look after you. Yuta looked at their joined hands, then up at him, a flicker of surprise in her violet eyes. Oh. Did he now? He did, Naruto said, his expression softening. He gave her hand a light squeeze. And I told him I would. For the first time since her father had appeared, a real, genuine smile touched Yuta's lips. The weight of the past and the fear of the future seemed to lift, just for a moment, replaced by the simple, solid warmth of his hand in hers. The red-haired emperor had come and gone, leaving behind a dire warning. But he had also, inadvertently, solidified a bond that was becoming more powerful than any haki. The war for the new era was coming, and its two most unlikely players were finally ready to face it, together. Chapter 6, Elegy for a Dream. Shanks's visit left a profound stillness in its wake. His warning echoed in the quiet moments, a constant, low hung beneath the surface of Uzushio's daily life. The name Imo was a shadow that now loomed over Naruto's every decision. He began to train his people with a new, quiet intensity. The drills were more complex, the strategies more nuanced. He was no longer just preparing them for a frontal assault, he was preparing them for a war fought in the shadows, a war of assassins, saboteurs, and enemies who would not announce themselves with cannon fire. But the most significant change was not in Naruto, but in Yuta. The conversation with her father, followed by the terrible truths he had shared with Naruto, had thrown her into a state of deep turmoil. Her entire life, her dream of a new Genesis had been her shield, her purpose. It was a simple, beautiful idea, to use her song to create a world without pain, a world where everyone could be happy and safe inside her Yuta world. But Naruto's philosophy, and the harsh realities Shanks had laid bare, had chipped away at that shield, leaving her feeling exposed and uncertain. Was her dream selfish? Was it a child's fantasy, an attempt to run away from the world's ugliness instead of facing it? She watched the people of Uzushio, the former slaves who still woke from nightmares, the war refugees who wept for lost loved ones, the beast pirates who struggled with the shame of their past, and she saw the truth in Naruto's words. Their pain was part of them. Their scars were maps of their survival. To erase that pain would be to erase a part of who they were. This internal conflict became a heavy weight on her soul. The world's suffering, which she had always felt as a distant, roaring ocean, now felt like a personal, crushing tide. Every sad story she heard, every pained face she saw, became another crack in her resolve. Her dream, which had once been her source of strength, was now the source of her torment. She wanted to save everyone, but for the first time, she was terrified that her method of salvation was a lie. She grew quieter, more withdrawn. Her songs, usually so full of life and boundless optimism, took on a melancholic, fragile quality. She would often stand on the cliffs for hours, staring out at the maelstrom, lost in thought. Naruto gave her space, sensing that this was a battle she had to fight within herself, but he never let her feel alone. He would appear with a warm blanket when the night wind grew cold, or sit silently beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. It was this vulnerability, this crack in the soul of the world's most powerful songstress, that the enemy had been waiting for. Far away, in a darkened, soundproof chamber in a hidden section of Mary Geos, a man sat in a high-backed chair. He was nondescript, dressed in the simple, gray uniform of a mid-level government functionary. His hair was gray, his face was gray, his eyes were a flat, lifeless gray. He was utterly forgettable, which was his greatest asset. This was Cypher Pol Aegis Zero Agent Corvus, a man whose existence was not recorded in any official document. His devil fruit was a secret even within the world government, the no Mi, the mind fruit. It was not a fruit of telepathy or mind control, nothing so crude. It was far more subtle. Corvus could touch and amplify the emotions that were already there. He could nurture a seed of doubt into a forest of paranoia, fan a spark of anger into an inferno of rage, and, most potently, twist a desire for good into a dangerous, destructive obsession. He had been studying Yuta for weeks, through the relayed senses of various covert agents. He had her psychological profile, her history, her traumas. And now, he sensed her conflict, her pain, her desperation. She was a perfect instrument, ready to be played. In his chamber, Corvus placed his fingertips on a strange, crystalline orb connected to a complex series of dials and antennae. The device was one of Vegapunk's forgotten prototypes, a psychosomatic resonance amplifier. It allowed Corvus to project his influence over vast distances, provided he had a clear emotional target. He closed his eyes, his bland face utterly serene, and he reached out with his mind, not toward Uzushio, but toward the aching heart of Yuta. He didn't plant new thoughts. He simply took her own and gave them a gentle, insidious push. Her dream of a new Genesis wasn't wrong, his influence whispered, cloaked in the sound of her own inner voice. It was simply not bold enough. Naruto's way is slow. It is fraught with pain and loss. People will still suffer. People will still die. But her way is absolute. It is perfect. It is the only true salvation. The people of Uzushio, they seem happy, the whisper continued, twisting her love for them. But they are still shackled to their trauma. They still carry their scars. In the Yuta world, those scars would finally fade. They would be truly free. Isn't that the greatest gift she could give them? The gift of forgetting? Naruto doesn't understand, the influence suggested, preying on her deepest fear. He is strong, yes, but he is still a man of the old world, a world of conflict and struggle. He cannot see the beauty of a world without it. He is holding her back. He is holding them all back. If she truly loves him, if she truly loves them all, she must save them from themselves. The subtle poison worked its way through her exhausted, conflicted mind. The whispers soothed her doubts, not by resolving them, but by burying them under a renewed, fanatical conviction. Her dream wasn't a lie, it was the ultimate truth. Her pain wasn't a sign of weakness, it was the righteous suffering of a Messiah who held the key to everyone's happiness and was hesitating to use it. Her eyes, which had been clouded with doubt, now burned with a new, terrifying clarity. Her purpose was restored, sharper and more dangerous than ever before. That evening, Yuta announced she would be holding a special, impromptu concert for the people of Uzushio. Everyone was delighted. They had missed her vibrant, joyful music. The entire island gathered in the main square, which was decorated with glowing lanterns. The former pirates, the refugees, the children, even Naruto himself, all sat together, an eager audience for the woman who had brought so much light to their home. Naruto watched her take the stage, and a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. The melancholy was gone, but the joy he expected to see wasn't there either. In its place was a look of serene, almost manic determination. It was the look of a zealot, not an artist. "Kit, something's wrong," Kurama warned, his own senses on high alert. "Her emotional state, it's too stable. Too perfect. It's unnatural." Before Naruto could react, Yuta raised her microphone. "My dear friends," she began, her voice resonating with a strange, hypnotic power. "You have all suffered so much. You have fought, you have endured, and you have built a beautiful home here. But the struggle is not over. The world outside is still full of pain, and its shadows will always try to reach you here." She smiled, a beatific, loving smile that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. "But I have a solution. A gift for all of you. For Naruto. A world where there are no more shadows. No more pain. No more tears. A new era of eternal happiness. And all you have to do, is listen to my song." She began to sing. The melody was beautiful, the most enchanting she had ever composed. It was a lullaby woven with threads of pure bliss. As the first notes washed over the crowd, a wave of visible energy, a shimmering pink and purple aurora, radiated from the stage. One by one, the people in the audience slumped over, their heads nodding as if falling into a deep, peaceful sleep. Their physical bodies remained, but their consciousnesses, their very souls, were being pulled away. "Yuta, no!" Naruto yelled, realizing what was happening. He shot to his feet, but he was too late. The wave of energy hit him, and despite his immense spiritual fortitude, the world around him dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and color. He found himself standing not in the town square of Uzushio, but in a world made of dreams and music. The sky was a swirling symphony of pastel colors. The ground beneath his feet was made of glowing musical staves, and candy-colored notes drifted through the air like leaves. In the distance, a colossal, magnificent castle made of crystal and sheet music towered over the landscape. This was the Yuta world. Around him, the people of Uzushio were reappearing. But they were different. Their scars were gone. The haunted look in the eyes of the refugees was replaced by a vacant, blissful smile. "Zaka, the gruff foreman, was laughing and juggling glowing musical notes. The children were flying through the air on the backs of friendly, cartoonish animals. They were all happy. Perfectly, terrifyingly happy. "Do you see, Naruto?" Yuta's voice echoed through the dreamscape. She descended from the sky, no longer in her simple jacket but in a magnificent, winged costume, like a goddess of music. "Isn't it beautiful? No more pain. No more suffering. Just endless joy. This is my gift to you. To all of us." Naruto looked around at the mindless, euphoric bliss of his people. He saw Yumi, the little mink girl, riding on a fluffy cloud, her smile wide but her eyes empty. This wasn't happiness. It was a lobotomy. "This isn't real, Yuta," he said, his voice firm, turning to face her. "You haven't saved them. You've trapped them. You've taken away their choice, their struggles, their very identities." "Their identities were full of pain," she retorted, her expression unwavering. "I've freed them from that. Here, we can be together forever, with no world government, no assassins, no wars. We can be safe. Why are you fighting this? Don't you want to be happy?" Naruto knew he couldn't fight her here. This was her world, governed by her rules. Physical force was meaningless. He could unleash Kurama's full power and he would probably just turn into a giant, fluffy, nine-tailed mascot. This was a battle of wills, a battle for her heart. He didn't power up. He didn't prepare a jutsu. He just looked at her, his blue eyes cutting through the surreal landscape, filled not with anger, but with a profound sadness. "I am happy, Yuta," he said softly. "I was happy back there, in the real world. With you." His words, so simple and sincere, were the one thing her fortified mind wasn't prepared for. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "I was happy watching you teach the kids to sing," he continued, taking a step toward her. "I was happy listening to you argue with Zaka about where to put the new fountain. I was happy sitting next to you on the cliff, even when you were sad, because we were sad together. That's what happiness is, Yuta. It's not the absence of pain. It's having someone to share it with. It's the bonds we build in the real, messy, imperfect world." He reached into the core of his being, to the lessons he had learned from Irika, from Jiraiya, from his battles with Nagato and Obito. The power to connect with another's heart. He didn't use his chakra to show her his memories this time. He used it to reach into hers. "Let me show you," he whispered, his voice resonating with a gentle power that was the antithesis of her dream world. The candy-colored world around them flickered. Suddenly, they were standing in the real Uzushio, but it was a memory, a moment from the past week. Naruto saw Yuta teaching Yumi how to harmonize. The little girl was struggling, her voice squeaking, but Yuta was patient, encouraging, her smile genuine. When Yumi finally hit the right note, her face lit up with a joy so pure, so real, it outshone anything in the Yuta world. "That," Naruto said, his voice beside her. "That little girl's pride in her own achievement. That's real. You can't give her that here." The scene shifted. They saw a group of the former beast pirates, sitting around a fire. One of them was tearfully confessing the atrocities he had committed under Kaido's rule. The others weren't judging him. They were listening, sharing their own stories, finding a grim, painful solidarity in their shared past. It was an ugly, heartbreaking moment. But it was also a moment of profound healing. "That forgiveness they're finding," Naruto said. "That's real. That's what forges a bond stronger than steel. In your perfect world, there's nothing to forgive." Scene after scene washed over them, real moments from their life on Uzushio. The joy, the sadness, the struggle, the triumph. Each one was a testament to the beauty of an imperfect reality. Finally, he showed her one last memory. It was of the two of them, sitting on the cliff, his hand in hers, watching the sunset after Shanks had left. The feeling of his hand, solid and warm. The shared, unspoken understanding that they would face the coming storm together. This, Naruto said, his voice thick with emotion. Us. This is real. I don't want a perfect, smiling doll who looks like you. In a dream world. I want you. The real you. The one who gets sad, and angry, and confused. The one who sings off-key when she thinks no one is listening. The one who fights for a better world, even if she's not sure how to build it. I love that Yuta. And I will fight beside her, in the real world, no matter how hard it gets. He finished his appeal, his heart laid bare. I can't promise you a perfect world, Yuta. No one can. But I can promise you that you will never, ever have to face it alone again. In the real world, on the stage, a single tear traced a path down Yuta's cheek. The serene, zealous mask was cracking. The whispers of the mind user were being drowned out by the thunder of Naruto's sincerity. Her power, which was fueled by her conviction, began to waver. In the Yuta world, the crystal castle began to fracture. The candy-colored sky flickered, showing glimpses of the real, starry night above Uzushio. Yuta looked at Naruto, her violet eyes swimming with tears. The divine costume dissolved, leaving her in her simple dress. But I'm so scared, she whispered, her voice breaking. The world is so full of hate. I just wanted to protect everyone. To protect you. I know, Naruto said, closing the distance between them and pulling her into a gentle hug. But you don't have to carry that burden by yourself anymore. We'll carry it together. His unwavering love, his complete and total acceptance of her, flaws and all, was the final blow. It was a truth more powerful than any lie, a light that banished the shadows Corvus had nurtured in her heart. With a sob, she collapsed against him, her will to maintain the Yuta world shattering completely. The dream world dissolved. Naruto found himself back in the town square. The people of Uzushio were stirring, waking up as if from a deep sleep, confused and disoriented. Yuta was in his arms, weeping, her body trembling with exhaustion and emotional release. He held her tight. It's okay, he murmured, stroking her hair. I've got you. You're back. In his hidden chamber in Mary Geos, Corvus jerked back from the crystal orb as if he'd been burned. A feedback loop of pure, unfiltered emotional honesty had surged through his connection, overloading his senses. A thin trickle of blood dripped from his nose. Connection severed, he grunted, his gray face pale. The anomaly, his emotional clarity, it's a weapon in itself. He didn't fight her power. He healed the trauma that fueled it. He wiped the blood from his lip, a flicker of something other than placid indifference in his flat gray eyes. It was frustration. And a sliver of fear. He had tried to turn Naruto's greatest ally against him and had failed. Worse, he had inadvertently forged their bond into something even stronger, something unbreakable, tempered in the crucible of her darkest moment. The Stitched Hand Elder's plan to break Naruto's spirit had not only failed its first test, it had backfired spectacularly. They had tried to turn his song into a weapon against him, and in doing so, had only helped him find its true harmony. Chapter 7, The Summit of Emperors. The aftermath of Yuta's internal crisis settled over Uzushio like a morning mist, quiet, heavy, but eventually burned away by the sun. Yuta was exhausted, emotionally scoured, but she was also free. The fanatical obsession with her new genesis was gone, replaced by a quiet, determined resolve to use her music as Naruto had suggested, not as an escape, but as a source of strength for the real world. Her bond with Naruto, having been tested in the deepest parts of her soul, was now absolute. The quiet moments they shared were no longer tinged with his concern or her uncertainty, they were filled with a simple, profound sense of partnership. The rest of the world, however, did not wait for personal healing. While Uzushio was finding its new equilibrium, one of the other emperors was making a move. Marshal D. Teach, Blackbeard, had not been idle since the fall of Kaido and Big Mom. His power base had grown exponentially, absorbing territories and subordinates with a terrifying appetite. Now, he set his sights on a prize that would choke the economies of dozens of nations, the Syrii archipelago. The Syrii Islands were not a major military outpost or a place of historical significance. Their value was purely logistical. They sat astride the Azure Current, one of the only stable, navigable sea routes that connected the northern and southern halves of the New World. Whoever controlled Syrii controlled the flow of trade, food, and medicine to over 30 kingdoms allied with the world government. It was a strategic masterstroke, a pirate's version of a siege. By simply parking his fleet there, Blackbeard could hold entire populations hostage, demanding exorbitant tolls or, more likely, forcing them to sever ties with the world government and swear allegiance to him. The news sent a shockwave through the global community. The Marines, stretched thin and still reeling from the public humiliation of the failed Buster Call, were slow to mobilize a force large enough to challenge an emperor's entire fleet. The kingdoms under threat cried out for help, but their pleas to Mary Geos were met with bureaucratic silence. The world government was focused on its shadow war with Naruto, and Blackbeard's blatant power grab was a secondary, if irritating, distraction for them. The situation was rapidly spiraling into a humanitarian crisis. Food shipments were being turned away, medical supplies were being plundered, and Blackbeard's notoriously brutal crews were using the captive islands as their personal playgrounds. It was Buggy the Clown, of all people, who inadvertently triggered the next phase of the conflict. In a televised address from his Cross Guild headquarters, flanked by his two unimpressed warlord subordinates, Mihawk and Crocodile, Buggy delivered a typically grandiose and tearful speech. "The citizens of these great nations are suffering," he wailed, streams of crocodile tears running down his painted face. "And for what? The greed of that oaf Blackbeard. The Cross Guild cannot stand by and watch this injustice. We will, strongly condemn his actions. And offer a very generous bounty on his head for anyone brave enough to take it." Mihawk sighed, polishing his sword. Crocodile just facepalmed. But Buggy's empty posturing, broadcast worldwide, had an unintended effect. It put the other emperors on the spot. The world was now watching, waiting to see how the other major powers would react to Blackbeard's aggression. To do nothing would be to show weakness. On the Thousand Sunny, Monkey D. Luffy, now a seasoned and respected emperor in his own right, watched Buggy's broadcast with a frown. "He's making people starve," he said, his usual carefree demeanor gone, replaced by a cold anger. "That's not what being a pirate is about." Sanji lit a cigarette, his expression grim. "If those supply lines are cut for another week, the Elbian kingdom will face a famine. We get our best flour from there." "This is more than just about flour," Sanji-kun, Nami said, poring over a map. "He's destabilizing the entire region. It's going to lead to wars. It's a mess." Luffy stood up, his decision made. "All right. We're going. We're gonna punch that Teach guy in the face and open the sea back up." It was a typically direct, Luffy-style solution. But as his crew began to prepare, a strange, single-sailed vessel bearing the flag of the Red Hair Pirates arrived with a message. It was from Ben Beckman. The message was simple: "Don't go in alone. Teach is expecting a head-on challenge. It's a trap. He wants to pick us off one by one. A meeting is needed. The old rules are dead. It's time for a new approach." The message proposed an unprecedented gathering, an informal summit on a neutral, uninhabited island named Risky Reef, a place known for its treacherous tides and razor-sharp coral, making a large-scale ambush difficult. An invitation was extended to the Straw Hats, the Cross Guild, and the newest, most enigmatic emperor, the Maelstrom King. When the messenger gull arrived at Uzushio, Naruto read the letter with a thoughtful expression. Yuta stood beside him, watching his face. "A summit of emperors," she said, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "Luffy. Buggy, a representative for my father, and you. All in one place. It's either the beginning of a great alliance or the start of the biggest war in history." It's an opportunity, Naruto replied, his eyes gleaming with strategic fire. Blackbeard is a bully. He's using brute force to create chaos. But chaos can be leveraged. He thinks he's laid a perfect trap, but he's also overextended himself. He's made himself a target for everyone at once. Kurama's voice was a low growl in his mind. This is a snake pit, Kit. You'll be in a room with the world's most powerful and treacherous pirates. Any one of them could be planning a double cross. I know, Naruto thought back. But I spent years navigating the political landscape of the 5 great nations, dealing with stubborn Kage and treacherous daimyos. Pirates can't be any more complicated than that. He looked at Yuta. I have to go. This is the kind of political stage I was talking about. A chance to be seen not just as a fighter, but as a leader. Then I'm going with you, she stated, her chin held high. Naruto smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. Risky Reef was as inhospitable as its name suggested. A flat, windswept mesa of black volcanic rock, surrounded by a churning sea full of jagged coral spires that jutted out of the water like broken teeth. There was no vegetation, no life, save for the grim-faced pirates now gathered on its plateau. The Straw Hats had arrived first, the Thousand Sunny anchored carefully in a deep channel. Luffy stood with Zoro and Sanji, his arms crossed, his expression unusually serious. Next came the Cross Guild's garish flagship. Buggy stepped onto the island with a theatrical flourish, flanked by a bored-looking Mihawk and a scowling crocodile, who looked as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Finally, the Red Hair Pirates were represented not by Shanks, but by his first mate, Ben Beckman, who arrived alone on a small, fast-moving cutter. His presence was a quiet but immense weight, the calm confidence of a man who could hold an admiral at bay with a single rifle. The atmosphere was thick with tension. These were rivals, enemies who had clashed in the past. Mihawk and Zoro exchanged a silent, challenging gaze. Luffy looked at Buggy with a mixture of annoyance and pity. Crocodile eyed everyone with suspicion. It was into this tense standoff that Naruto and Yuta arrived. They didn't come on a ship. A column of swirling wind and leaves descended from the sky, depositing them gently onto the center of the plateau. The sudden, silent arrival, a demonstration of a power none of them could explain, immediately captured everyone's attention. Naruto stood there, his orange and black jacket a stark contrast to the grim surroundings, his expression calm and unreadable. Yuta was at his side, her presence adding another layer of complexity. The world-famous diva, allied with the mysterious Fifth Emperor. Luffy's eyes widened, a huge, excited grin breaking through his serious facade. Whoa! You're the guy from the newspaper. The whirlpool guy. Shishishi. That's a cool trick. Naruto chuckled, the tension immediately lessening. Monkey D. Luffy. Heard a lot about you. Ben Beckman gave a slow, approving nod. Uzumaki. Glad you could make it. Buggy, meanwhile, was sweating profusely. Another monster. First Shanks, then Mihawk, now this guy who could fly. He hid behind Crocodile, who simply pushed him away in disgust. The introductions, such as they were over. Ben Beckman, taking the role of moderator, got straight to the point. Teach has blockaded the Azure Current. He's daring one of us to challenge him. He's prepared for a one-on-one fleet battle. He knows Luffy's straightforward, he knows Shanks wouldn't risk an all-out war for a trade route, and he knows the Cross Guild is, otherwise occupied. He gave a pointed look at Buggy, who flinched. He's counting on us to act like traditional pirate crews. But we're not going to. So what's the plan? Sanji asked, exhaling a stream of smoke. We all attack at once. A four-way fleet battle against his would be a bloodbath. A battle of attrition is exactly what he wants, Crocodile interjected, his voice a low rasp. He has two of the most powerful devil fruits in existence. He can afford to lose ships and men. We can't. The bickering began immediately. Luffy insisted on just punching Blackbeard. Buggy suggested luring him away with treasure. Crocodile proposed a complex economic sabotage plan. They were a room full of apex predators, each with their own style, their own ego, and no experience working together. The summit was on the verge of collapse before it had even begun. It was Naruto who cut through the noise. "You're all thinking like pirates," he said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that made everyone pause and look at him. "You're thinking about fleet battles and one-on-one duels. You're playing the game by Blackbeard's rules. The solution isn't to meet his force with our own. It's to make his force irrelevant." He knelt down, sweeping a patch of dusty rock clean with his hand. He then used his finger to draw a map of the Siriai archipelago and the surrounding currents. It was a perfect, detailed map, drawn from memory. "This is Blackbeard's fleet," he said, placing a handful of small black pebbles in the middle of the main channel. "This is his strength. But it's also his weakness. He has to maintain this blockade to achieve his goal. He's stationary. He's a sitting target." He looked up, his blue eyes moving from Luffy to Beckman to Crocodile. "We don't attack him. We attack his supply lines." He drew new lines on his makeshift map. "His fleet is massive. It needs a constant supply of food, water, ammunition, and rum. Those supplies are coming from his territories here," he pointed to a spot to the north, "and here," he pointed to the west. "They're traveling along these two routes. They're his logistical arteries." Zoro grunted, a flicker of understanding in his eye. "Cut the arteries." "Exactly," Naruto said. "But not with our main fleets." That's what he'd expect. "We use small, fast, elite teams. Surgical strikes." He looked directly at the Straw Hats. "Luffy. Your crew is perfect for this. You take your ship, hit this northern supply route. Cause chaos. Sink his supply ships, raid his forward bases, then disappear before his commanders can respond." He then turned to the Cross Guild. "Mihawk. Crocodile. You two are masters of subterfuge. You take a small, fast ship and intercept this western route. Crocodile, you can incite rebellion on his supplier islands. Mihawk, you can handle any single, powerful enemy they send to stop you. Buggy, you will stay with your main fleet and create a diversion here." He drew a circle far to the east, making it look like you're preparing a full-scale assault. "Your reputation for theatrical nonsense will make it believable." Buggy started to protest, then realized it was the safest job and quickly agreed. Finally, Naruto looked at Ben Beckman. "The Red Hair Pirates have the best intelligence network in the world. Your job is to feed us real-time information on Teach's fleet movements. He'll be forced to split his forces to deal with the three separate threats. He'll have to pull ships from the blockade to chase Luffy, send a commander to deal with Crocodile, and keep an eye on Buggy's fleet. He'll be stretched thin, confused, and bleeding supplies." He stood up, dusting off his hands. The map he had drawn was a brilliant, multi-pronged strategy that used each crew's unique strengths to their fullest potential. It wasn't a pirate plan, it was the plan of a military general, a Hokage. There was a moment of stunned silence. The sheer strategic elegance of the plan was undeniable. It avoided a direct confrontation, minimized risk, and attacked Blackbeard's core objective in a way he would never anticipate. Luffy was the first to break the silence, a huge grin on his face. "So we get to go on an adventure, beat up some bad guys, and get food? I like it. Shishishi." Crocodile, for the first time, looked at Naruto with a sliver of respect. "The plan is sound," he admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "It's ruthlessly efficient." Ben Beckman lit a cigarette, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's a damn good plan. Simple, effective, and it plays us all to our strengths. The Red Hair Pirates are in." The summit had found its direction. Naruto hadn't seized command through force or reputation. He had earned it with sheer competence. He had listened to their arguments, understood their capabilities, and forged a strategy that was better than any of their individual ideas. He had a magnetic, confident presence that wasn't born of arrogance, but of an unshakable certainty in his own abilities. As the other crews prepared to depart, Naruto stood with Yuta, watching them. The Celestial Wardens were surely monitoring this summit. The fact that he had just capably, almost effortlessly, united the other emperors, even for a temporary, common goal, would be the final, terrifying piece of evidence they needed. It proved he wasn't just a physical threat. He was a political one. A charismatic leader who could potentially rally the world's strongest pirates under a single, unified banner against the world government. He had just painted an even bigger target on his back. Luffy bounded over to him before leaving. "Hey, Whirlpool guy. Naruto. That was awesome. After we beat up Teach, let's have a party. My musician can meet your musician." He gestured to Yuta, who smiled. "I bet Brooke would love to see her panties." Sanji immediately appeared and kicked Luffy in the head. "Don't be rude to a lady, you idiot captain." Naruto just laughed. "It's a deal, Straw Hat." As the Thousand Sunny sailed away, Naruto felt a sense of optimism. This world was violent and chaotic, but it was also filled with people like Luffy, people with good hearts and an indomitable will to do what was right. Maybe, just maybe, building a better world here wasn't such an impossible dream after all. Yuta slipped her hand into his. "You did it," she said, her voice full of pride. "You brought them all together. You're really becoming an emperor." Naruto looked at their joined hands, then out at the sea, where the ships of his new, temporary allies were disappearing over the horizon. "The hard part's just getting started," he said, a determined glint in his eye. "Let's go home. We have a war to coordinate." He had just put a plan in motion that would shift the balance of power in the entire world. And in doing so, he had sealed his fate as the world government's #1 enemy. The game was afoot. Chapter 8, The God Slayer's Gambit. The plan, which the world would later come to call the Emperor's Pincer, unfolded with devastating efficiency. Coordinated from a communications hub Naruto established on Uzushio, a room filled with Den Mushi maps, and a handful of his most intelligent shadow clones, the multi-pronged assault on Blackbeard's operation began. The Straw Hats, with their characteristic chaotic energy, crashed into Blackbeard's northern supply line like a cannonball. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, a whirlwind of rubber, steel, and fire, dismantled forward bases while Frankie's brilliant modifications to the Sunny allowed them to outrun any pursuit. They were a specter of mayhem, striking and vanishing before Blackbeard's lumbering command structure could even process the attack. To the west, Crocodile and Mihawk were a far more insidious threat. Crocodile, with his extensive underworld connections and mastery of manipulation, ignited fires of rebellion on the islands that supplied Teach's crews. He offered them freedom, weapons, and a new, more stable business partner in the Cross Guild. Faced with a choice between Blackbeard's tyranny and Crocodile's ruthless but predictable capitalism, island after island flipped their allegiance. Any of Teach's commanders sent to quell the uprisings were met by a single, bored-looking man with a cross-shaped sword, and they were never heard from again. Buggy, for his part, played his role to perfection. He amassed the Cross Guild's main fleet far to the east and began a series of hilariously inept raids on barren rock islands, accompanied by thunderous pronouncements of his imminent grand assault. Blackbeard, underestimating Buggy as everyone always did, was forced to divert a significant portion of his blockade fleet to counter the perceived threat, pulling his forces thin. Blackbeard was hemorrhaging resources, his fleet was being starved out, and his commanders were being picked off or bogged down in unwinnable conflicts. He was being outmaneuvered at every turn, his brute force strategy collapsing under the weight of a far more sophisticated one. The great emperor was being played like a fiddle, and the puppet master was a blond man on an island hundreds of miles away. Naruto sat in the command center, a map of the new world spread before him. Shadow clones flickered in and out of existence as they relayed real-time information from Ben Beckman's spies. He moved markers, dictated new coordinates, and anticipated Teach's countermoves with the practiced ease of a grandmaster playing chess. Yuta sat with him, no longer just a companion, but an active participant. Her fame gave her a unique form of intelligence. She had contacts and fans in almost every port, and her network of friends provided invaluable information on local troop movements and morale, details that even the red-hair pirates sometimes missed. Teach has pulled the grave digger and the corpse collector from the blockade, a clone reported, its voice a perfect echo of Naruto's. He's sending them after Luffy. Too late, Naruto murmured, moving a marker representing the Thousand Sunny. Luffy's already 2 islands ahead, heading for the Rindle Reef. The currents there are too treacherous for ships that large. He's chasing a ghost. Yuta pointed to a different part of the map. I just got a message from a baker in Port Royal, one of Blackbeard's supply islands. She says the people are ready to revolt. Crocodile just needs to give them a nudge. Relay that to him, Naruto instructed another clone. Tell him the tinder is dry. All he needs is a spark. It was a symphony of strategy, and Naruto was its conductor. He was proving that he was more than just a powerhouse, he was a leader of immense capability. But it was this very success, this brilliant demonstration of his command over the world's most chaotic forces, that triggered the doom waiting at his own doorstep. In a secret underwater base located in the calm belt, the stitched hand Gorosei watched a similar map, his face a mask of cold fury. The reports were undeniable. The anomaly, Uzumaki, had united the emperors. He was dismantling another emperor's entire operation without throwing a single punch himself. He was demonstrating a level of strategic acumen and charismatic leadership that was, in the elder's eyes, a far greater threat than his Rasengan. He is a kingmaker, the elder whispered to the man standing before him. He is showing the world that cooperation is more powerful than conquest. This idea is a plague. It must be purged before it spreads any further. The man standing before him was not a man at all, not anymore. He was a monument to the world government's dark science. This was Warden Commander Javelin, the elder's fanatical second-in-command. Taller than a normal man, his body was a grotesque fusion of flesh and black, angular technology. One arm was a massive, multi-barreled cannon. His legs were powerful, piston-driven constructs. His face was a cold, impassive human mask, but one eye glowed with the red light of a targeting reticle. Seams of what looked like sea prism stone were visibly integrated into his very bones, glowing with a faint, sickly green light. He was a living weapon, designed with one purpose, to hunt and kill gods. The Maelstrom King is off his island, Javelin stated, his voice a synthesized, metallic monotone. His attention is divided. The iron is hot. Indeed, the elder replied, turning away from the map. His strength is his bond with his people, his fortress-like home. We will take that away from him. We will burn his sanctuary to the ground and slaughter his followers. When he returns, he will find nothing but ash and corpses. His spirit, the very core of his power, will break. The world will see his ideals lead only to ruin. He placed a stitched hand on Javelin's metallic shoulder. You have your orders, Commander. You will lead the 1st and 2nd Purity Divisions. You will deploy the Dome of Silence. Show this false king what true, absolute power looks like. Leave no one alive. Erase Uzushio from the map. Javelin's red eye glowed brighter. For the true order. For the one king, he intoned. He saluted, not with a hand, but by slamming his weaponized arm against his chest with a deafening clang of metal on metal. He turned and marched out, his heavy, piston-driven footsteps echoing like a death knell. The attack came without any warning. There was no fleet on the horizon, no approaching spiritual pressure. One moment, the sky above Uzushio was a clear, peaceful blue. The next, a hole seemed to tear open in reality itself. A swirling vortex of black and purple energy appeared, and from it descended a fleet of sleek, black vessels that looked more like predatory insects than ships. They were the Celestial Wardens. Before anyone on the ground could even react, the lead ship fired something into the sky. It wasn't a cannonball. It was a projectile that soared to the apex of the sky above the island and detonated, not in an explosion, but in a silent, expanding wave of ethereal, gray energy. The wave washed over the entire island in a heartbeat. The Dome of Silence. For the devil fruit users among Naruto's people, the effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Ishi, the jaguar mink, was sparring with another crewmate, his claws crackling with electro. The moment the wave hit, the electricity vanished. He tried to summon it again, but nothing happened. It was like a part of his very soul had been switched off. A woman who had eaten a minor zoan fruit, allowing her to grow wings, suddenly found her wings retracting painfully into her back, her connection to the fruit severed. The energy-dampening field was absolute. But it was more than that. The field was designed to disrupt all forms of spiritual energy. Haki became sluggish, difficult to focus. Observation felt like trying to see through thick mud. Armament was weak and brittle. Yuta felt it most keenly. She was in the town square, humming a tune that was making the flowers in a nearby garden bed grow faster. The moment the wave hit, her connection to the Yuta no Mi was severed completely. The song in her soul went silent. The vibrant, living world of music she inhabited was gone, replaced by a flat, terrifying quiet. For the first time since she was a child, she was just normal. The shock of it made her stumble, her breath catching in her throat. The warden ships descended, landing troops all across the island. These were not standard marines. They were soldiers in black, full-body armor, their faces hidden by reflective visors. They moved with a chilling, synchronized efficiency, armed with rifles that fired beams of concentrated energy. From the largest ship, Warden Commander Javelin descended, his heavy feet cracking the pristine stone of the town square. He surveyed the idyllic town with his one human eye, his expression one of utter contempt. A nest of filth and heresy, his synthesized voice boomed across the square. Purge it all. The black-armored soldiers began their advance, firing their energy rifles into homes, at fleeing civilians, their orders clear: extermination. But Uzushio was not defenseless. To arms, a voice roared. It was Zaka. The former beast pirate, his devil fruit useless, grabbed the largest pickaxe he could find, its haft as thick as his arm. They want our home. They'll have to pay for it in blood. The shinobi pirates, Naruto's core guard, sprang into action. Their devil fruits were gone, their haki weakened, but Naruto had not trained them to be reliant on a single source of power. He had trained them as shinobi. Ishi, his electro gone, drew a pair of long, wicked-looking trench knives from his boots. Gontu, the fishman, unable to use his fishman karate to its full potential, hefted a massive anchor on a chain. They were all warriors, with or without their special abilities. They met the warden's advance with a raw, desperate fury. The battle for Uzushio had begun. It was a brutal, ugly affair. The wardens had superior technology and numbers. Their energy rifles cut through cover, and their armor could withstand normal blows. But Naruto's people had something else. They were fighting for their home, for their lives, for the only place that had ever accepted them. Yuta, her mind reeling from the loss of her power, was pulled to safety by one of the shinobi guards. They tried to hustle her toward the Poneglyph cavern, the designated shelter. But she stopped, her eyes wide with horror as she watched the battle unfold. She saw Kaito, the kind fishman who had built the irrigation system, get struck down by an energy beam. She saw homes she had sung in burst into flames. The peaceful sanctuary was being turned into a slaughterhouse. The guard trying to save her was struck from behind, collapsing at her feet. A black-armored warden leveled its rifle at her. Yuta froze, her heart pounding, her mind blank with terror. She was powerless. She was just a girl. A pickaxe, thrown like a spear, embedded itself in the warden's chest, its high-tech armor screeching as it pierced through. The soldier fell. Zaka stood over its body, breathing heavily, his face a mask of grim determination. "Get up, diva," he grunted, pulling her to her feet. "This is no place for statues." His words, so harsh and direct, shocked her out of her fear. He was right. She couldn't sing. She couldn't fight. But she wasn't useless. She looked around at the chaos. The fighting was disorganized, her friends were being picked off one by one. They were fighting with courage, but without a leader. Naruto was gone. But she was here. A new fire lit in her violet eyes. She remembered the strategy sessions with Naruto, the way he moved markers on the map, the way he saw the entire battlefield as a single, cohesive entity. She had learned more from him than just how to love. She had learned how to lead. "Ishi," she screamed, her voice, stripped of its musical power, now sharp and commanding. "Fall back to the central fountain. Use it as a choke point. Don't let them flank you." Ishi, pinned down by enemy fire, heard her voice and his head snapped up. It was a sound tactical order. He roared to his comrades, and they began a fighting retreat toward the square. "Zaka." Yuta continued, her mind racing, seeing the battlefield as Naruto would. "Take your men and circle around through the eastern workshops. Their left flank is exposed. Hit them from the side." Zaka looked at her, surprised by the sudden authority in her voice, then grinned a bloody grin. "You heard the lady. Let's go crack some helmets." He and his crew of former pirates disappeared into the smoke-filled streets. Yuta, the powerless diva, had just become the battlefield commander of Uzushio. She couldn't fight, but she could think. She began to shout orders, her voice cutting through the din of battle. She directed squads to set up ambushes in the narrow alleyways. She had others create diversions, drawing enemy fire while another group attacked from behind. She was using the town Naruto had built, a town she knew as intimately as he did, as a weapon. The tide of the battle began to turn. The wardens, used to fighting disorganized pirates, were unprepared for coordinated, guerrilla-style tactics. Their advance slowed, then stalled. They were taking casualties. Javelin, watching from the center of the square, narrowed his human eye. The resistance is more organized than anticipated. The diva. She is directing them. His red targeting eye zoomed in on Yuta, who was now perched on a rooftop, pointing and shouting commands. She is the Nexus. Eliminate her. He raised his cannon arm and took aim. Hundreds of miles away, Naruto froze. He was in the middle of directing a flanking maneuver for Crocodile's forces, but a sudden, visceral cold gripped his heart. His sage mode, which connected him to the life force of the world, was being dampened and distorted by the dome of silence over Uzushio, but it wasn't a complete blackout. He could still feel the life energies of his people. And they were screaming. They were being extinguished, one by one. He felt Kaido's life fade. He felt others, people he knew, people he had saved, dying. And through the static, he felt a singular, overwhelming wave of terror and desperation from Yuta. "No," he whispered, his eyes widening in horror. He stood up, kicking the strategy table over. Maps and markers went flying. The clones in the room dissolved instantly as he drew all his focus inward. "They waited until I was gone," he snarled in his mind, his voice a fusion of his own and Kurama's rage. "They're attacking my home. They're attacking Yuta." He didn't hesitate. He didn't weigh his options. His plan to defeat Blackbeard was forgotten. The new era could wait. His family was dying. A cataclysmic explosion of golden chakra erupted from him, so powerful it cracked the very walls of the command center. His eyes shifted, the pupils becoming crosses, a perfect fusion of Sage Mode and the Ninetales power. Six Paths Sage Mode. He vanished. He didn't run or leap. He simply ceased to be there, breaking the sound barrier, the light barrier, and every other barrier that stood between him and his home. He was a golden comet of pure, righteous fury, streaking across the new world, his only thought a prayer and a promise. Hold on, Yuta. I'm coming. Back on Uzushio, Javelin's cannon arm whined as it charged, the energy building to a critical point. He had a lock on Yuta. She was just a girl on a rooftop. A simple, biological target. For the true order, he intoned. He fired. A massive beam of pure, destructive energy, enough to vaporize a battleship, screamed across the square, aimed directly at the woman who had dared to defy them. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.